Okay, Your Worship, we're live and ready to go.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the special meeting of council for Tuesday, April 6th, 2021. As usual, I'll start out with I'll call the meeting to order and start with a reading of the roll call. Michelle Sherwood.
Hello, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Cole.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm here.
Thank you. Ron Kelly Sparrows.
I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Matt Pride.
I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Elizabeth Hartling.
I am here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Becky Goodwin.
I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Craig Bowser. Okay, I don't see Craig. Kieran Miller.
I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Michael Deal.
I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Dwayne Acton.
I'm here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Thank you. Donna Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm here.
Thank you. Jamie Burke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm also here.
Thank you. Councillor Finney.
I'm here, Ron.
Councillor Butcher.
I am also here. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
I'm here as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
I too am here, Deputy Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud.
I am here. Thank you.
Thank you. And Councillor Tower.
I am here, Your Worship. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll start then with the first item on the agenda. Oh, first, can I have a motion to approve the agenda?
I put that forward, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Finney. Have a seconder?
I'll second
I'll-
that, Councillor Black.
Thank you, Councillor Black. Question?
Question.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion's carried. Okay, we'll start out then with the RCMP and Sergeant Gagne.
Good evening, everybody, Your Worship. I'll just start off by saying March was a better month than February for calls for service. We're ending we've just finished our yearly, our fiscal year for us is the end of March. So we'll see how busy we were for this past year compared to previous years, but I'd say overall we're probably noticeably busier, just in overall general calls for service. Related to calls for service, last month, I'm not sure if everybody's aware, I presented at the public safety meeting there last a couple weeks ago, saying there's a new public format for occurrences across the province, at least from the RCMP perspective. It's called the New Brunswick Occurrence Map. It's geographical representations of calls for service in RCMP jurisdiction. By clicking on different segments of the map, you can see the total number of calls for service for RCMP in any area, and that includes Sackville municipal area. The number of occurrences for the previous year is also provided for context in there, as well as relatively current year-to-date tally for specific types of calls for service. So this occurrence map is part of a series of documents the RCMP is making available as a part of a commitment to accountability and transparency. This verbatim from the media release there that was sent out a few weeks ago. On that same page, there's also a daily occurrence report, which provides what kind of calls for service we get on a daily basis. And again, that includes a distinction for Sackville Municipal. So when I'm submitting my report tomorrow, I'll have the links to that, but if anybody can listen and can just Google RCMP New Brunswick, it should pop up right in the Google page, and you can just follow the links. So related to calls this past month there, just February was unusually busy. I'd say March was probably more of a normal month, but we still saw a little bit of an increase from same time last year. Related to the EMA though, we haven't received very many calls for service related to let's say people breaching the EMA order or anything like that. There's been a handful of calls like that, but we haven't charged anybody in the last month. Also, our checks for people quarantining were very low as well. So on that front, it was quieter than it has been. Traffic wise is, it's commiserate with the time of the year, I guess. We always expect a few minor collisions based on weather and stuff, and certainly March was had a few minor collisions and a couple of injury collisions in town. With that, we did some traffic enforcement initiatives. We had a couple of distracted driving operations. We also had some patrols for speeding, and there were some warnings and violation tickets handed out, and also for suspended drivers and insurance registration offenses. Other than that, also I'll attach the CPO's report there tomorrow. But she's been delivering a program with the schools, and so she's doing a lot of meetings via Zoom and stuff like that, and taking some training to deliver some of these programs. That'll be attached tomorrow as well. But other than that, that's all I had tonight, barring any questions.
Okay, thank you, Paul. Is there any questions of Sergeant Gagne? Seeing none then. Thank you, Paul, for that.
You're welcome.
And we'll move on to the audit. And I will, if I can, have our treasurer introduce the auditors.
Thank you, Your Worship. So within the report, I provided a quick summary, which basically outlines that the auditors were in the fall of 2020 and then came back in the spring of 2021 to complete and finalize the audit. I've attached a detailed summary, which outlines each category, the budget, overages, and underages. So this detail, as well as the explanation, can be provided to the press and or the public after beginning tomorrow. So I know that will be a question, so that will be able to be provided after tomorrow. The actual audit, of course, cannot be presented to the public until after it's received approval of council, which is scheduled for April 12th, 2021. So as per the report, General has ended the year with a surplus of 70,240, and Utility has ended the year with a surplus of 9,723. At this point, I will turn it over to Andrew Boudreau from Stevenson and Partners, who himself and his staff performed the 2020 audit.
Hello, I'm Andrew from Stevenson and Partners. So, I had some share content. I think I can share my screen. There you go. We prepared the audit this year, like we have for the last number of years. Like Mike said, everything went very well. We had no issues came up. I provided a few documents. One of them is the report to Town Council. This goes through our various risk areas, various items from the audit, and a few other items in there. So a few points I wanted to bring from that is on pages 2 and 3 of that, we discussed all the various risk areas, and all those risks were satisfied during the audit. No errors were found in our audit testing in any of those risk areas, and that the town was within the requirements of the Local Government Act with regards to the various financial ratios. So there was absolutely no issues there. I have pulled out a few pages, a few extracts from the financial statements. So the first thing I'm going to go over is the independent auditor's report. This report is a 2-page report. It goes through various areas. The first area is the audit opinion. So we have audited the accompanying consolidated financial statements for the municipality of the town of Sackville, which comprise of the consolidated statements of financial position as of December 31st, 2020, and the consolidated statements of operations, accumulated surplus, changes in net debt and cash flows for the year that ended, and a summary of significant accounting policies and other explanatory information. In our opinion, the consolidated financial statements present fairly in all material respects the financial position of the municipality of the town of Sackville as of December 31st, 2020, and the results of its operations and cash flows for the year that ended in accordance with the Canadian public sector accounting standards. The rest of the report goes through our basis of opinion. It goes through the responsibilities of management and those charged with governance. It goes through the auditor's responsibility in the financial statements, and it will be dated on the date that the statements are approved by town council. The next statement that I'm going to go through is a consolidated statement of financial position. So the areas of interest here to discuss is, number one is your net debt. Your net debt this year has been reduced by $2,386,000 from $11,628,000 to $9,241,000. So it's always good to see your net debt going down. This is a result of increases in cash balances, small increase in receivables, reductions of accounts payable, and reductions of your long-term debt or your debentures. On the non-financial asset side, we have the main area is the tangible capital assets. They're at $54,480,000 compared to $55,336,000. This is made up of additions of assets in the year and then depreciation taken on assets during the year. The accumulated surplus has gone up from $44,026,000 to $45,573,000, and this is a result of your income in accordance with public sector accounting standards. So I'll flip down to the next page, and this is your statement of operations. From the regular statement, you normally see there has been adjustments for public sector accounting standards, so it looks a little bit different than the statement. It's not a whole lot. It's a lot of the fiscal service stuff is what comes out of the statement. But overall, it brings together your budget, which this is based on public sector accounting standards. So we change it from the standard balanced budget to a different number for budget, which takes into consideration depreciation and a few other items compared to your actual. So you can see your actual budget is $885,904, and your ending, your actual results was $1,547,420. This is a result of drops in revenue, but mainly in the sale of service side. You can see between budget and compared to last year, the sale of service is at 585 compared to 683 budget, but also reductions in expenses. So overall, expenses had gone down $804,000. So overall, this is the reason why you see an increase in the surplus compared to the budget. The self-service is mainly as a result of COVID and all the different stuff that happened this year as a result of that, not being able to provide as much service as you normally would. The next statement is your statement of cash flows. This goes to your cash flow. It goes through various items as the operating transactions, capital transactions, and financing transactions. So operations is your main operations. So it takes the surplus, adds in the amortization, which is a non-cash item. There's a few changes on the statement of financial position, but you did bring in $3,702,000 from operations. That money from operations was used to partially for acquisition of tangible capital assets. Now this number looks a little different. It's at $4.8 million, but there was a change in assets under construction this year, also of $3 million. So the actual addition compared to last year is about $1.7 million of capital assets. And what's nice to see is that out of those additions, only $340,000 was funded through the issue of debt. So not a lot of debt increase in the year for the capital asset additions. So it's funded through operations, and your long-term debt payments were $1.4 million. So you had an overall drop in debt of $1,140,000. So that's, like I had mentioned, the net debt number, that's a big portion of the drop right there. So overall, there was an increase in cash of $809,000 this year, bringing up to $2,395,000, of which a lot of that is in reserves. So I'm going to flip forward to the next page, and as Mike was mentioning previously on the surpluses, you see the highlighted numbers are the surpluses that he was talking about under the old standards of $70,000 and $9,723. And this schedule reconciles to our number for the public sector accounting standards, so you can see where the differences are. So the big difference is got to do with all these items within the capital and reserve funds, which are accounted for differently under public sector accounting standards. On the reserve funds, I mentioned before that there was a lot of the cash was in reserve funds. So at the end of the year, there was $2,472,000 in reserve funds compared to $1,089,867 in the prior year. This is a result of partially with interest. As you know, interest rates were not great this year because of the big drop in prime. So not a lot of interest income this year, but there was a lot of money put away in reserves. We had $100,000 general operating. We had $1,117,000 in general capital, and you had $160,000 in water sewer capital. So that's $1,377,000 that was put into reserves this year, which increased that quite a bit. That's the actual financial statement portion. In addition to that, as I mentioned before, the audit went well this year. We were provided with all the information that we had requested. Explanations were given for everything we needed, and all documentation we needed was appropriate. And there was no issues with regards to internal controls or any suggestions on internal controls in which we're going to have to report on. So we'll be providing a letter stating that there was no issues on internal controls. Is there any questions on the financial statements or the audit?
Okay, thank you, Andrew. Any questions from council? Seeing none. Okay, I'll thank you, Andrew and Michael, and congratulations on another successful audit. And it's good to see us in a surplus position and decreasing debt. Okay, then we'll move on to item number 3, the bylaw number 262, the street traffic bylaw about skateboards. And Mr. Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. So the street traffic bylaw. So a lot of this came down to timing. A first reading was processed, and we had asked our insurance company for an opinion. So unfortunately, the opinion came late, around the same day of first reading, maybe a day or two before or after. But insurance came back and reviewed the thought of us removing skateboards from the bylaw. And in their review, they look at a risk management perspective. So the insurance from a risk management perspective responded that many things should be reviewed, from the width, volume, traffic type, and conditions of each road and sidewalk. Would additional maintenance be required? Hazards that could occur by not prohibiting skateboards on streets and sidewalks, and suggested legal consultations. So of course, we've also asked for a claims review that was done, and they looked at their claims history across Canada. Overall claims were relatively small, but claims that did pertain to skateboards were related to accidents that happened on roadways where they were interacting with vehicles or pedestrians. So as per our insurance, we then followed up with our solicitor, and asked the question, would a skateboard fall in line with the same rules and regulations of a bicycle? You can see that we paraphrased the legal opinion, but their legal opinion on this was that the Act specifically defines bicycle with requirements of headlamps, reflectors, always keeping one hand on handlebars, which skateboards don't have. While the word skateboard is not expressly used, the Act makes a distinction between bicycles and other skateboard-like devices. What they have indicated is allowing skateboards on roadways would be like allowing pedestrians to travel on roadways. There are actually court cases that they did provide us, mainly in Ontario, but in Canada, whereby they considered, with lack of a proper definition in the Motor Vehicle Act, they considered skateboards to be pedestrians. And these were actual court cases that did take place. So there is no definition in the Motor Vehicle Act for skateboard, and therefore courts have determined that they are pedestrians. So therefore, allowing skateboards on roadways would be like allowing pedestrians to travel on the roadways. So we also asked about implications of skateboards being removed completely from the street traffic bylaw. We're currently explicitly prohibit skateboarding on streets and sidewalks. We're advised that a ban on skateboard would also not automatically negate the town's liability, but that it would result in a potential for additional legal liability if the town fails to maintain its streets and sidewalks in anticipation of skateboard use. So they do continue, the legal opinion continued to say that ultimately lifting the ban would not have an impact on the town's existing insurance coverage, as the town's is covered for items council allows in the town's operations. However, increase in claims could cause an increase in premiums as our rates are reviewed each year based on risk, historical claims, new claims, and successful claims. At the end of the day, council can permit skateboards on public streets, but such a decision does not come without risk. From staff's perspective, we do recommend that council not proceed with second, third reading of the amendments to the bylaw 262. However, staff will continue to explore enhancing our skate park, including its location, size, equipment in 2021, and bring back for future budget discussions.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Are there any questions or comments on this? Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I just want to get some clarity if I could, I guess. So it's indicating here in the report, allowing skateboards on roadways would be like allowing pedestrians to travel on roadways. So the municipality currently has many roadways that that do not have sidewalks, and pedestrians have to travel on that roadway. Is that taking into consideration if they're going to walk somewhere, they have to travel on the roadway? Is that taken into consideration when our insurance is looked at, the sidewalks, if there are any or aren't any?
From insurance perspective, no. They look at what are we covered for, and what is our risk analysis. As we know, our insurance went up 10% last year. That was discussed during our budget process. A lot of municipalities, including cities, were seeing 20 to 30%, and some higher than that increases in premiums year over year. We've been told that we have good risk management and good policies and laws in place to prevent claims. We also have had issues in the past where we've had third-party liabilities, which has taken our insurance out of the equation. So those go a long way in what the adjusters look at for our rates. The opinion on the roadway did come from the solicitor and calling them pedestrians. So pedestrians walking, of course, are to, if there's no sidewalk, of course, stay on the side of the roadway. Whereby if a skateboard is on the side of the roadway, it may not be directly on the side of the roadway, but pedestrians can also walk in gravel shoulder area, whereby skateboards would not be able to skateboard in a gravel shoulder area, and thereby being more in the flow of traffic.
So in regards to the insurance company and the claims that they referred to that have taken place across the country regarding skateboards, are those claims that have been filed against municipalities?
My understanding is they are. the statement that was made in the report is the statement we received from the insurance company. But Frank Cowan Company, who is our insurer, does insure municipalities, so it would be likely that those would be lawsuits that did go against the municipalities.
And so staff are making a recommendation. Are there other options that could be considered in regards to these findings? Were there other options that staff had looked at that could be presented to council as an option?
I looked at it from the insurance and legal perspective and got the opinions relating to that. We had met as a group, the engineer, our CAO, and looked at what the recommendations from the insurance company were, and felt that it did put a lot of onus and a lot of additional work on staff in order to meet those criteria for a lot of the roadways, and therefore we wouldn't be able to accomplish that with the existing staff we have, and ensure that the liability is covered. So that's therefore we came up with we made this recommendation. Ultimately, as noted in there, council can make the final decision. If council wish to proceed with second and third reading and allow it, that would be council's prerogative to do so. If they did so, then council would be assuming the additional liability and the potential for claims and the potential for increased risk in insurance premiums down the road.
I'd kind of like to see some more options here. You know, I understand, you know, there's a legal and an insurance obligation, but, you know, what are some of the options? What is being done or has been done in other municipalities, not necessarily across Canada, but elsewhere? Does the option exist that if this was going to be implemented, is it implemented just on certain roadways and not congested roadways? Does the option exist that as a pedestrian, the skateboarder would have to face traffic when they're on the road as opposed to flowing with traffic? I'm curious about that information, and I think that's important information to have before just ultimately saying yes or no. I don't think it's definitely a black and white kind of situation. I think there might be more information there, and I'd like to see some more information on it.
I think Mr. Burke could probably respond as well.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Burke.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I guess, and just to follow up to Councillor Michaud's comment and to build on Mr. Beale's analysis, I mean, I guess it all depends on how much research do you want us to do, because we can spend a considerable amount of time chasing this issue. I mean, if council is interested in pursuing a bylaw change like this on particular streets, there's still going to be some added risk to the municipality that Michael's alluded to. So we provided a recommendation to suggest that, given the advice from our insurance provider and our solicitor, that this isn't something that we're comfortable recommending the council proceed with. But if there's some additional information the council needs, I think we're going to have to scope it down a little bit, because this is there's not a lot of research available throughout Canada with respect to skateboards on public streets. Our lawyer has told us that it's largely unregulated, that there's a regulatory gap, and based on court literature and findings, that's where I guess the opinion and reasoning comes to with respect to skateboards being treated more like pedestrians. So I guess before we settle here, I'd like to have some direction from council on what particular information you're looking for, and we can try to get that. But the case numbers provided by our insurance company, and Michael can correct me if I'm wrong, there's not a whole lot of information out there. I know our staff sergeant struggled to find some information from a statistics point of view, and I suspect our insurance providers didn't have a lot of information at their fingertips either. So before we spend a considerable amount of staff resources on this issue, I mean, that's something we're going to have to go back and revisit the scope of what council's expecting.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butcher.
Thank you. I think, correct me if I'm wrong, again, like like Sean says, for clarity, isn't one of our issues here that a large number of municipalities have no regulations in their bylaws regarding skateboarders. So there are lots of municipalities that are out there that are allowing it because they don't have something in their bylaws that say you can't. But ours, unfortunately, has a bylaw that says no skateboarding. So now that we're trying to pay more attention to active transportation and fresh air and being outside and lowering greenhouse gases and all of those things that skateboarding would actually do, to our disadvantage, if you're looking at it that way, is that we already have something on the books that says you can't. So simply by removing that wording from our bylaws, from taking away that bylaw, it implies that we are saying that we do allow it, which I guess we would be doing. But there are all kinds of municipalities out there that neither say you can or can't. So what we have is, a while back, long enough ago, somebody decided that you couldn't. So that's a bit of an issue. One thing I would be wondering about, because I just feel like it really sucks, that I've heard many times that we are in the business of managing risk. That's what towns do. I wonder how many claims there have been from places with open water. Like, we have lots, we have the lake, we have the holding ponds, we have the wetlands, we have all of those places that are open water. I realize that if we were to take out the ban on skateboarding, it could potentially mean that our insurance rates will go up next year. It could potentially mean that there could be a claim brought against the town. And this is something we really need to consider carefully. But I wonder what kind of balancing them. How many claims are there on average across New Brunswick in regards to, water and water sports and swimming? And it's about balancing risk, and I'm still unsure about whether or not we want to just say, let's keep on with the status quo, because I feel like our ban on skateboards is kind of outdated. But I do understand that removing that ban could be opening a can of worms that another municipality that has never had the ban doesn't have to worry about.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, speaking after Councillor Butcher makes me realize that we're on the same wavelength here, because the points that I want, she raised the points that I want to raise. So there are a couple of things that I would like to say sort of in addition, is that when this bylaw came forward, I was really pleased, because I liked the idea of finding ways to get along, to celebrate diversity, to find accommodation, and to not just because it would make our life more complicated, let's just deny some small group, some marginalized group, their ability to enjoy Sackville. So I wasn't comfortable with the law the way it is. And I was hoping and expecting that we would have to fine tune the first draft before we could get something that dealt with the legitimate issues of safety and liability and enforcement and that kind of stuff. But I really, and again, I agree, I don't think we should just abandon this because it's hard, especially at the expense of a group that's already being penalized. So I would like, I'm not sure, like when Councillor Michaud talked about research, I just think that because the law in most jurisdictions is silent, that's the term they use on this issue, that whoever uses a skateboard on the street does it at their own risk, without permission, but without being forbidden to do it. And when this came up, whatever it was, 6 or 7 years ago, is because the bylaw officer said, I don't like this. We have a law on the books that says they can't do it, but they're doing it, and we're just not dealing with it. And I think we're going to have to address this fact. And I'm not convinced that if we take the ban out of the bylaw, that means we're approving it, right? It just means that there is no, it's silent. So that means if people do it, that means they would be treated as if they were walking on the street. And you're allowed to walk across streets and you're allowed to walk along streets, but you don't have the right of way. You have to be careful. So this is hard, but I don't think we should just give up on it because it's difficult. So I also take the recommendations of staff seriously. And this would be more work for everyone, and it would expose us because we would be trailblazers going into this because virtually every other municipality has ducked the issue. So I'm not sure what we're saying, but any one of us next week can make a motion. But if nobody makes the motion, this thing dies. So I'm not sure what to do, but I don't like just walking away because it's hard. So anyway, I'll stop rambling.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Well, I like the way that Councilor Micho is talking, is us getting more information as other options. I understand a lot of the argument for allowing skateboards because we have a group that's out there and want to make use and become active. That's why we were doing the skateboard park. So there is information out there. Our insurance, I'm sure, can gather that information quickly because it's one of their concerns when it comes to what municipalities do on our properties. Although they, if they want to charge us more, they'd be happy to be able to do it if we did things that caused it to happen. But the Canadian Safety Council has statistics out there. So I'm sure there's some simple ways for staff to go searching without doing a lot of legwork themselves to gather the information and then look at that information and possibly give us a recommendation or present it and see if we can come up with something. I don't agree with Councillor Evans when it says by removing it doesn't mean we become liable. I think that we could check the solicitor, but I think because we're not allowing it and we've been told by our insurance it's not a good idea, we've been told by our legal, I'm not so sure you should do it. And all of a sudden we say, well, let's remove it because we know that means, all right, they can do it and we can't charge them. And I think that would open us up to a case that says, well, you had it so we couldn't, but my son had an accident, now he's in the hospital and he's never coming back out again. That's a lawsuit. So I would rather do the constructive way to gather the information, do the research, and then we can make a much more informed decision as other options to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Finney.
I was just going to say, because of the recommendation made by solicitors and the insurance company, I think actually probably it might be in the best interest for it to go in that direction right now. There can be more information gathered after the fact, finding out, for instance, exactly what municipalities have allowed it and what claims have been put against them. I'd love to know exactly in the dollar wise, as a matter of fact, as well, but just how many municipalities across the country do and how many don't. And the ones that have not, as Councillor Butcher said, have not put saying actually that it's banned completely, actually that sort of hinders us because we turned around and said that it's not allowed. So now we're turning around and people would like for us to turn around and switch it so that we can say we'll take that out, and that means that actually they can skateboard at their own risk. The idea is that we're doing risk management, but are we doing it in the positive direction or are we doing it in the negative direction? That's why I think right now we need to adhere to what the insurance and our solicitor has advised, because we really don't know a lot about other municipalities and what's going on. And I think a little more research would help. The kinds of where, as a matter of fact, the insurance company said there were other municipalities. Where are they? And how many claims have been put against them, and what kind of accidents have transpired, and that kind of information would be very interesting to know before we put ourselves into the position of more liability for us. And our insurance costs are definitely going to be going up. There's no doubt about that. So sometimes I sympathize with them, but sometimes I know what they want, but sometimes some people need to be protected from themselves. And so I think in the best interest of everyone, it would be the ideal thing to respect exactly what our solicitor and our insurance companies have advised us to do at the present time. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Black.
Thanks. Just a couple of comments before I had a couple of questions. Councillor Towerhead said that Councillor Evans said that if we remove that we are not liable. He actually said that we would not be accepted. We would not be, he didn't say that we wouldn't be liable. He said that we would not be accepting it. We would just remove it, and that would be that. I take Councillor Michaud's point about some streets, but I think that any streets that we would use, if we made the distinction between some streets and other streets, there would still be risk management there. There'd still be liability. I take your point, though. I think that that's something to possibly investigate, but I think no matter what streets we use, if it's all of them or some of them, I think we're still going to be, the liability is still there. As for more research, in the report that we have, it says a claims review through the insurance provider indicated that although the sampling of risks is relatively small, so the insurance provider has looked at some of these claims and has deemed them to be small. Now, they did pertain to skateboards on roadways where they were interacting with vehicles or pedestrians. So, they did their research. The town staff is giving us a summary of what the insurance provider has said and the lawyers had said. But I mean, the research is there. And from what we see from the report from staff, the sampling of risks is small. And as for insurance costs going up, there was a comment made, I think that was Councillor Finney. Again, in the report, it says ultimately lifting the ban would not have an impact on the town's existing insurance coverage, because it won't. It won't put the insurance cost up initially. Just because we remove the skateboard ban doesn't mean that our insurance costs are going to suddenly skyrocket. The only way that that would happen is if we had significant claims against the town if there were problems with skateboards being on the streets. So it doesn't necessarily mean our insurance costs are going to go up immediately. It just means that it might possibly if something happened. So I guess I have two questions of staff. We talked about this in the liaison meeting, but it'd be nice if the rest of council could hear as well. I guess my first question is, we currently allow bikes on the road because that's in the Motor Vehicle Act, and bikes are more accepting than skateboards. But if somebody was severely injured on a bike, would the town be liable for an accident such as that? And has that happened very often with the town of Sackville over the last X number of years?
Someone care to answer that? Mr. Burke? No?
Thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Councillor Black. I'll let Mr. Beal speak about the insurance particular claims, but I guess all situations are different, and it depends on the circumstances of the collision or what that claim may be. So at the end of the day, if it's our street, they'll certainly be asking some questions about our infrastructure. But in terms of particular claims in recent years, Michael, perhaps you want to comment on that?
Yeah, to my recollection, there has been no claims where the town has been named relating to bicycles and accidents. As Mr. Burke has indicated, every incident is totally different. But we've been named in claims from trip and falls, as reported in last month's council report, to someone traveling a crosswalk at night and not the flashing lights, but the overhead signal light that just shows the white crosswalk guy being burnt out and thereby creating a further safety hazard. Some are successful and some are unsuccessful, of course. I'd have to go through quite a detailed analysis of that to see what is and isn't. But any time that a lawyer feels that there is a potential where a municipality can get named, they are naming the municipality, and then we have to defend. Did we do everything in our power? Did we do proper inspection? The first question that I'm asked when we have a legal claim against the town of Sackville is, where are your documented records relating to? We'll use this as the example, relating to when was the last time the street sweeper was out? When was the last time it was inspected for cracks? For crosswalks, when was the lights last inspected? For sidewalks, when did you drop salt on the sidewalks the last time? These are the questions that adjusters ask myself and other staff in preparation for defense, passing it on to insurance legal for the potential of defense. Have we had any bicycle claims? To my recollection, no. And but they do ask a number of questions, and that's where insurance had come back with their risk management recommendations, and that falls within the inspection, the cleaning, the record keeping.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beal. Did you have another question, Councillor?
Yep, and I fully appreciate that we would have claims against us for various other reasons. But I guess I was making a comparison between bikes and skateboards, because those are two modes of traffic that oftentimes are mixed with pedestrian or vehicles. But anyway, thank you, Mr. Beal. The last question I had was, the insurance company had said to look at width, volume, traffic type, conditions of the road and sidewalk. And I wondered if, and I'll leave this up to the deputy mayor, but I was wondering if possibly Public Works could talk about what extra work might be involved in having the streets looked at if skateboards were allowed on the road. Would it add a lot of extra work to staff? Anyway, just again, so council could have some idea about what that might look like.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Acton, can you answer that question in a few words?
Sure, in a few words. Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Black. I mean, right off the top, one of the big challenges is this time of year. If we're required to make sure that our streets are smooth and pothole free, but I can't patch streets for another 2 months because of the weather conditions and the temperature, what do I do for all the skateboarders in April and May who want to use the streets? I can't fill those potholes. So that's a huge challenge for Public Works, especially at this time of the year. And potentially on the other end, although we typically have all the patching done by then. As far as record keeping and, street sweeper, we do have a street sweeper. We send it out as much as we possibly can when we have staff. We're also doing other projects in the summertime. That takes away staff time to not allow the street sweeper to go out. So there's a lot of other challenges that would come along with that. Yes, it would take possibly extra resources. And Mr. Beal talks about record keeping. There would have to be substantial amount of record keeping, and we'd have to literally evaluate streets and document that we've evaluated and checked all the streets out. If there was a pothole that maybe got missed, it needs to be patched right away. Otherwise, if somebody hits it, now it becomes our liability because we knew about it and we didn't fill it on time. So all of these things come into play when or if the council decided to allow skateboards on streets. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of indication on some of the things that we would have to deal with and some of the issues that we would continue to deal with, i.e. this time of year.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess just, I don't want to kind of keep repeating the same points that have already been made, but I think we all realize that it's, skateboarding is a healthy and commonplace activity. And certainly the circumstances have likely changed around skateboarding today than they may have been when the bylaw was drafted. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to help you manage the town's risk. And I guess to get back to Councillor Michaud's original point of what the options are, there's really two. We ban it or we regulate it. And if there's an appetite there to regulate it, I guess what we're telling you is that that comes with an increased risk. And you're right, we say from time to time, as Councillor Butcher alluded to, we're in the risk management business because of the nature of the programs and activities and operations that we run. So if there is an appetite amongst council to regulate it, we can work with our solicitor to come up with the best risk management type language that we can to test it if that's what council wishes. And it's not that we use the word that it's hard, so we don't want to do it. It's not that it's hard. It's that it's complicated. There's not a lot of data out there that we can hang our hats on. But we've identified it is that it's also potentially expensive. You've just heard Mr. Acton talk a bit about some of the increases that would cost from a resources point of view. We also we run a pretty cut and dry operation here, and any additional costs, especially from a staff resources point of view, that can be significant. So I guess that's something that we would want to understand more fully in the event that there is an appetite for council to pursue regulating this type of environment on public streets. We totally understand this is not an easy decision. It's not black and white. It's all comes down to how much risk are we as a municipality looking to take on. And all we're doing is caution you that our lawyer and our insurance providers have pointed out some very significant implications in the event that we do try to regulate this type of or permit this type of activity on our town streets.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask our town clerk, Ms. Beal, is there any rules in either local governance or Roberts about the time between first reading and subsequent readings?
Thank you, Your Worship. No, there's no time limit between first reading and what could be second or third reading. Although the rule of thumb is not to, kind of let something sit out there for months on end without, completing the process.
Okay, thank you. Because what I might suggest is that if those of you who require or think there's more information out there to be had, if you could send, just see if everyone agrees with this, send a note to Mr. Burke saying exactly what kinds of information you want. And you can see how easy it is to get. If it can't be obtained easily, we can find out next week in our meeting and potentially do second and third reading of this in the meeting in May. I think it would be unfair to have this hang over to another council because, we were somewhat familiar with it, and it's something we probably should clean up. So I would suggest, if no one has any real objection to it, is those who want more information, send a note to Mr. Burke about exactly what kind of information you want. And he can determine, probably in fairly short order, I would suspect, whether it's readily obtainable or not. And then we can look at either doing readings at our next meeting or the meeting in May. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, just a sort of a point of order. Perhaps we could ask the clerk about what sorts of meetings we might be having in May.
In May, we are having one regular meeting. There's no special meeting.
And when will the regular meeting be?
First week in May.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Your Worship, the regular meeting in May will be on May 3rd.
Yeah.
I see. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I see no other comments. So if
Ron.
Councillor Finney.
Yes. I was just going to say, just want to mention that a couple weeks ago I was reading in the Times transcript. Councillor Black mentioned about bicycles. There's an issue they're having in Moncton right now. What they're doing about it, I'm not sure. There's been no follow-up that I've seen in the paper as late. But of course, I mean, I believe for a number of years they've had no problems with bicycles in the city of Moncton, but now all of a sudden they seem to be having one. What are they? Of course, each municipality is going to be different because of the size and everything, and of course the infrastructure. So the thing is my biggest request maybe to Mr. Burke would be to find out the municipalities across Canada that do allow skateboarding and that have had claims put against them. How much are the claims? How many claims have they had against them? How big are the municipalities? What's their infrastructure like? As compared, like Mr. Atkins said, I mean, we've got a lot of infrastructure that needs some holes filled in some cases. And so I'm curious about the number of claims, and I'm really curious to know whether or not they wish they had have never allowed it in the first place, because maybe because of the claims. And if they're still allowing it, what are they doing to try to mitigate the claims that are being brought forward? I'm just curious. I just want to make sure that we're really looking at the whole picture before we turn around and say, yeah, let's open it up. And of course, claims won't go up right away because there'd be no claims. But in time, I believe we could probably say with some certainty that there probably will be some claims. We've had them with slips and falls and trips. And so those are the kinds of questions I'd like to have answered before, more information needed before making a final decision. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, so if there's, if everybody's agreeable to proceeding that way, I'll just ask that you send any questions you might have to Mr. Burke, and we can then determine if it's essentially what data is out there and if it's of relevance to us. Okay. All right, with that, we'll move on to the fourth item, the speed limits on Pond Shore Road, and Mr. Acton.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. As a result of some public concern regarding speeding on Pond Shore, council will remember that Mayor John Heim had sent a letter off to the Department of Transportation Infrastructure back in January of 2020, requesting that the speed limit on the section of 940 be evaluated. This was also then followed up with the Deputy Mayor Aiken in late 2020, I believe November of 2020 was followed up. And then as a result of that follow-up, there was a response letter from DTI, and that letter indicated that there were changes to the way that DTI was administrating and controlling designated highways within municipalities. The letter did confirm that these changes would allow municipalities to make changes to various aspects of streets within their jurisdiction, such as on designated highways, such as speed limits, crosswalks, lighting, and so on. I will also make reference that this they had indicated that that change would come about sometime in the summer of 2021. So it was a little unclear as to when exactly that change would be made, but it did say that it would be included in the municipal manual in the summer of 2021. So while this was all going on, there were a few things that the municipality and the town had done. We had installed a radar speed sign along the Pond Shore area to act as a traffic calming device. In addition, there were road ditches that were mulched and alders and trees and shrubs removed from the ditches. There was also some things that the NB Power had done in conjunction, which wasn't part of the town. And there was also, we had discussed it with RCMP to make them aware of the speeding that were reported in this area. So following the letter of response from DTI, to properly evaluate the speed limit on Pond Shore, the engineering department retained WSP Canada, an engineering firm with the Traffic Engineering and Transportation Planning Division. They have offices in Moncton and Halifax to review and evaluate the speed limits for Route 940 or Pond Shore Road from Church Street to the town limits near Abjagan Road. And that report that WSP had provided the town is also attached, and council had a chance to review that, I suspect. So I'll just make reference to the, thank you, Becky. During the review of this section of the Internet Highway, WSP evaluated the existing road conditions. They collected data on the traffic volumes and speeds in the various locations along Pond Shore Road. They reviewed roadway characteristics and also reviewed reviewed and evaluated the posted speed limits as per the figure number 1. And I'll just ask Becky to go back so I can just indicate that. So these are the existing speed limits currently on Pond Shore. So as you're coming and heading towards Midgick, just past Uphill Drive, it changes from a 60 kilometers, stays 60 until beyond Station Road, or Mount View Road changes to 80 from there on out. And obviously coming back in, actually just on the town side of Mount View Road, it switches to 60, at which point it changes to 50 just past Uphill Drive. So those were the existing speed limits that they evaluated. Thank you, Beck. The evaluation of all the data collected along with the review of the road characteristics in consultation with the Transportation Association of Canada, which we refer to as the TAC manual, and the guidelines and the industry standard for the 95 percentile speeds were performed. Following the review and evaluation, WSP recommended that the posted speed limits should be increased to 70 kilometers per hour from the town limit in the north, so on the Abjagan end, to the current 50 kilometer an hour zone near Uphill Drive. Ultimately, this would replace a portion of the existing 80 kilometers, which is at the outer end near the town limit, and the 60 kilometer zone in the middle with a 70 kilometer per limit as per the image 4 below. So you can see here their recommendation was where the just past Uphill Drive, where it switched to 60. They're suggesting that it be switched to 70, where it would stay 70 until you reach the town limit. And when you're coming into town, obviously at the town limit, it would switch from 80 to 70, where it would stay to 70 until it got to the existing 50, where the existing 50 would remain. In addition to the recent work by WSP, I wanted to make note of the DTI also provided to the town some information on this matter back in 2009 when the previous or former mayor, Pat Estabrooks, had sent a letter off to reduce the speed limit on this section of Pond Shore Road as well. However, DTI concluded at that time that the speed limit would be maintained at 60 kilometers per hour. The section of street was evaluated by a member of their traffic safety section and determined that the existing posted speed limits of 60 kilometers per hour are appropriate for vehicle speeds, the roadway characteristics, the roadway development, and obviously collision history. So in staff's opinion, WSP's report does not provide justification for reducing the posted speed limit on Pond Shore Road. As such, we would, though, recommend that the existing speed limits be maintained. You could just go down a bit, Becky. So it would be, again, our recommendation that despite the advice of WSP, that the current posted speed limits remain the same. And then furthermore, that we recommend that speed radar signs be utilized in both directions to monitor speeds and act as a bit of a traffic calming device when possible. And I'd be open for questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Acton. I have a few comments on this, but if there are any questions before that, Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. So I was just reading through the report provided by that WSP. They reference 25 left turns between Uphill Drive and Mount View Road. Are those 25 left turns, is coming both directions? Is it 25 in total, 25 one way? I'm curious about that information, as well as they mentioned moderate grades. Does that mean Blind Hills? And to what extent of Blind Hills does that, what exactly moderate grades? How does that play into this? Because there are definitely Blind Hills there.
Okay, Mr. Acton.
Yeah, I'd have to research that a little bit, but I could definitely do that and get back to you with respect to that.
Thank you. Not sure what, I think Councillor Tower was next.
Thank you, Your Worship. First, Dwayne, is there a reason why we only did the checks on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. Not to my knowledge, those were the dates that the consultant had selected. I suspect it had to do with the weather. I know the timing of it was also something that they were struggling with the COVID and all that. It took us a bit of time to get them out there, to get the radars out. But I suspect it had to do with the weather conditions, and I suspect that they looked at that would be a typical time frame, the 3-day period for a section to give them the information they needed to evaluate that.
Okay, and the reason I asked, of course, is knowing some people, when they have had a weekend, now they're a little slower getting going in the morning. So on Monday, their speed going to work is going to be a lot faster. So therefore, that would change the readings of the average flow. And the same would be on a Friday. And I use this information because I was one of the counselors. I was the counselor, went up to Fredericton with George Woodburn and discussed this area with the provincial government. And I had mentioned something very similar to that, and he says, sure, that's the case, but we want to make sure that we have a good average, so we just pluck it in the middle and see what happens. So therefore, I think, personally, I think that the figures are a little tainted. And another thing, that when they're talking traffic in a rural area, and for the most part, that used to be a rural area, but that's now really a residential area because, well, we have 26 driveways and 30 houses just between Uphill Drive and Mountain View. So that's a lot of people coming out, as they say, left turns that they can make, because some of them houses had 2 driveways. So that's a lot of traffic that's coming out now as what it was the last time this was reviewed. And if the program gathering information is based on a rural road which has less residential, I can understand a change in flow saying, okay, this is okay. Or as the government said back when I went to Fredericton, the people are traveling through that area approximately 20 kilometers an hour more than your posted speed. So your posted speed is too low because people are comfortable of driving that, which is a scary thought, because speed on the highway is 110, and we know that you can do 130, and people, but they won't change the highway speed. So I'm a little weary of some of that information. And then when you consider the percentages that they talk about that are doing in excess of the 60 and excess of the 80, out of those number of vehicles that travel that way, because of the residential area on Pond Shore Road, 20 or 30 houses and a church, just to get to Mount View, those people will be driving slower at that point because they're getting ready to go into their driveways, their homes, or getting ready to turn onto Mount View Road. So I think that would also taint this figure, and which is what worries me about all this information. Increasing that speed, so I know you're saying we don't change it. I just feel that we want people to get out and get walking and become active. And if they go out and they're walking the side of the road with the kids, and we continue to allow the cars to fly by, that's still going to make life miserable for them. And so the quality of life in Sackville for them is not as high as in other residential areas, which is something I think we should be thinking about. And another thing, not directly related to this, but the information gathered, are some of these statistics, as in times of people speeding, given to the RCMP, sort of help them with their speed checks? And the reason I'm thinking of that is you're saying that by putting up the radar almost tells people, well, you better watch out, we're watching speed. So they will reduce their speed a little as they go into that. And if they've reduced their speed and we have this many people going over the speed limit, when the radars are gone, what speed is it then? You know, that's what worries me about it. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Evans.
Thank you. First of all, I concur with staff's recommendation in spite of the WSP report, and I'm not prepared to criticize the report, but I do want to make some comments about it before I make a suggestion. The timing of this, it was done in February, and in one of the pictures you can see snow on the road, so that even speeders slow down when there's snow on the road. They didn't mention the kids waiting for buses when they talked about road characteristics. So similar to what Councillor Tower is saying, this is hardly a rural area, it's more residential. The biggest factor I thought of is they gave us average speeds, which doesn't tell us much. But one of the things is they also noted that many people go very slowly. There are a lot of people going 40 kilometers an hour. So what that means is if you have an average that's slightly above the speed limit or at the speed limit, there are a significant number of people who are going well over the speed limit. And that the average hides that fact. And again, as Councillor Tower mentioned, I think this 85th percentile concept is a little bit troubling. The idea that if enough people do something, we should allow it. I understand the logic, and they're just following TAC. And so again, I'm not criticizing them for their recommendation based on what they measured. But my assessment of this is that we don't have a speed limit problem. We have a speeding problem. And in addition to the radar speed, it might have a sort of a traffic calming effect. I would urge that this motion also asks that the RCMP spend a little more time enforcing the speed limit in that area, because I think that's what's causing the problem. Not people going 60, but people speeding. And that's what we have to address. And I don't think we'll address that by changing the speed limit. And I'm certainly glad that we're not recommending increasing it. Thanks. Thank you.
Councillor Michaud, did you have another point?
Yeah, I had a couple other questions actually before you moved on there. First of all, I didn't see anything in the report about school bus stops, so I'm curious as to if there are any in that section. Also, was insurance and legal consulted in regards to the municipal's liability regards to the particular situation on Pond Shore? And I'm also curious as to what other options are possible. Is reducing the speed a possibility? Is extending sidewalks? Is widening the road? Councillor Evans talked about enforcement. You know, is it a combination of these? I'm curious about that as well. So,
okay, thank you. Councillor Finney.
First, my question is to Dwayne. Dwayne, I believe anybody who's been on council long enough, we turned around and lowered the speed limit on some of the streets from 50 to 40, if I remember. Was that a recommendation by people, or did the government say that the 50 was okay, but we decided to lower it to 40 anyway? And the other thing in relation to this, the 60, I think I like it where it is right now. I'm in agreement with Councillor Evans then. I don't think that raising it is the smart thing to do. And the other thing I was curious about is the speed limit signs that will be up. Will they be recording what the speeds are and as to how many vehicles are traveling that route in and out of town? Because I'm thinking that it could give us some data as to turn around to determine whether or not it does need to be lowered even by 10, say from 60 to 50, and maybe that will be an indication to the people that are driving fast that they have to slow down, because we're concerned about the people in that area, which is like Councillor Towers said, it's become more residential than anything else. So we have to be very concerned about them. So those are just a few comments and questions that I was just curious about. So that's all for now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor. Mr. Acton?
Sure, thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Finney. With respect to lowering speed limits, I'd have to research that a little bit. I know in my time, we have not, or I have not presented any speed reductions. I know there are some streets in town that are 40 kilometers, most of them are 50, and there are a few that are 40. That was done before my time, and I'm not sure where that would come from. I'd have to research to see whether that came from residents, whether it came, but obviously ultimately it was a council decision to do that, and council has the right to post and to approve the speed limits on all residential streets. With regards to the radar speed signs, they will record the quantity or the number of vehicles and the speeds. I'm still struggling with the current sign that's out there, and I have another one that needs to be repaired, but assuming that I can get that done, those signs would be able to record the number of vehicles and the speeds. The problem is the one that's there, I can't get the information off, so I'm still working with the company out of the States. Obviously, COVID has created some problems there in doing that, but we're still working with them, and we'll work with them to rectify that, to be able to record that information. And yes, I was working with RCMP to allow them the ability to download the information from those units to evaluate speeds.
Thank you. Councillor Finney, did you have another one?
Yes, I was just going to say to Dwayne. Dwayne, I think I might be able to narrow it down for you a little bit. I believe it was between 2008 and 2012, and I believe that's when, he's councillor at the time, Merrill Fullerton was on. And I believe he brought forward the idea of reducing one of the streets from 50 to 40. You can either talk to him, or maybe there might be some information within the town hall in retrospect in relation to the 2008 to 2012. But probably be simpler just to give Merrill a call, and he'd probably be able to give you a heads up on that right away, as a matter of fact. So I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Just a quick one, Dwayne. I'm glad you're sharing with the RCMP. I don't suppose that the recordings tell what time of day those speeds are going?
Yes, they do.
Oh, so they could, that should help them even more. Thank you.
And if you, on that note, if you read through the report, the bulk of the, I'll call it the abnormal speeds, are outside of the morning hours and afternoon hours, which was, in other words, in the middle of the night, I believe is the way that they had put it, is when you have those abnormal speeds, people out speeding late at night.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. I wish I'd gone first now, because everybody's stolen my thunder. Just sort of a couple of things before I say anything. in full disclosure, I do live in the area on Uphill Drive, so I do have a kind of not quite a vested interest because when the problem starts beyond where I live, but I do get to see what goes on there. And I had several critiques of this report, but I don't want this to be interpreted in any way as a critique of the integrity or the professionalism of the outfit that did the study. Okay, there's just, I have some problems with how it was done. There's no information as somebody has posted, for example, on people walking there. And I often see people walking up and down Pond Shore Road on the shoulder. Councillor Michaud asked about school bus stops. I believe this afternoon we determined the buses stop in that area 12 different places. So it's quite frequent. There's no data, and they said that their machine didn't work or couldn't detect around corners on the lower part of Pond Shore Road, which I find a bit disturbing. It's, you know, if that's a problem, move the machine so it can work. And what really bothered me, and there's all sorts of arcane statistical things in this I don't want to get into and bore everyone with, but there's no information on the problem area. The problem area is between sort of after Uphill Drive until you get just before Mount View Road. And their two detecting machines are nowhere near there. So I had a real problem with the fact that they essentially didn't monitor the problem. They said that what they call the vertical or horizontal, what was the word, geometry? That was implied it was relatively flat there, and it's not. If the machines couldn't detect near the corners of the lower part of Pond Shore Road, it certainly can't detect over and around the hills on the middle part. So I did have a problem with that. And there's several other things, like I say, statistical things I won't bother with. I might send a note to Mr. Acton later on. Now, I realize this problem of speeding is not unique to Pond Shore Road. I've heard reports on Charlotte, King, Squire, Weldon, Lorne, all over the place. So it's like Councillor Evans said, it's not a problem of speed limits, it's a problem of speeders. I was pushing for a while that we install radar cameras there. These are the ones that record speed and take a picture of the license plate, and then you can ticket whoever does that. And something we might have to, if we want to continue with this, pick up in our municipal reform. But the radar cameras had to be sourced by us, purchased by us, maintained by us, and fixed by us. So that'd be all our expense, but the fines would go to the province.
That's right.
So I think that's something we could work on changing. So I take the, when I first read the report, I couldn't believe they wanted to increase the speed limits. But I take council's recommendation, but I think this is something we should continue to look at, not only for Pond Shore, but for other places in town that are problem areas. And even if we had some of these cameras and we can work on keeping the fines for them and sort of paying for them, something we can move around. So speeders would not know where they were being monitored and could be controlled. So I'll leave my comments at that. And if anyone else has anything, I see no more hands. So we'll move on.
Mr. Burke.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just didn't want to forget that I think Councillor Michaud had a question on the options that were considered as part of the overall process. I think that's the only one we haven't answered, and I'll let Mr. Acton fill in the blanks in case I've missed anything. But we didn't explore any other options in terms of infrastructure improvements such as sidewalk construction, etc. That was something the council wanted us to do. Again, that's a fairly significant amount of work, but our Public Works Department does have cost estimates for a particular linear meter of street, sidewalk, etc. So that's some information that we could get if council so wished. But at this point in time, we didn't explore any options. And then just the only other point I would make is that this is still within the town's ability to change the speed limit. The province has told us that it's up to us. We do not have a traffic or transportation engineer or that particular type of expertise on staff. So that's why we retain WSP to put some work for us. And, you know, that's what we're relying on in terms of justifying the speed limit. But if council so wished, it's certainly within your ability to reduce the speed limit from 60 to 50.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Acton, do you have anything to fill in there? Or?
I would be curious to note how many councillors traveled the section of road at the speed limit and what their take of that was, because I have done that myself, and you got to remember that, because a few councillors said that, you know, it's residential, but if you look at the width of the street, it's considerably different than a Salem Street or Estabrooks or Park Street. The houses are back a long ways compared to all of those residential neighborhood. And you can see, typically you can see very well, you can see if there's anybody coming out of the driveway. Clearly you can see, other than the one hill, you can see somebody walking. And I have traveled it, and I travel that area considerably. And again, since this all came about, watch my speed, and I could stop for a pedestrian or a kid, or you can see them coming a long ways away. So I was just curious how many councillors were able to get out and do the same.
All I can say, I've done it rather regularly, and yes, I mean, 60 does feel slow through there, but that's not the issue. It's the safety issue. And I'd remind people too that Fulkins Drive, with 0 houses on it at one stretch and nothing but farm fields, has a limit of 50.
Yeah.
So, Councilor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. Dwayne, one thing I did forget to mention, which our deputy mayor mentioned, was that I thought the radars were in the wrong location. Also, so is it possible to move those? I mean, you had one just before we started going around the corner to head out that way, but to move the other ones so you can actually read just through that residential area. You know, because there's a lot of people there, and well, that's where the accident happened, and you know.
Oh, Councilor,
we have
the radar I was referring to is the one that WSP set up.
Yep. So if we could get them set up again and try it that way, and even nothing else, as Councilor Evans said, you know, wintertime traffic is slower, so now we're into this kind of weather, and well, it might make a difference. I just feel tainted. That's all, not for their fault, but because of those conditions. So,
okay,
thank you.
Okay, Mr. Acton, do you have a response to that, or?
I was just suggesting one of our recommendations was to put the radar signs there in both directions. There is one there now that is near probably, I believe it's just by Mr. Gautreau's house. There is a speed sign there now, and our recommendation is to put perhaps one in both direction and monitor those speeds, and be able to fix the radar units so that we can get the information off and then share that with the RCMP. That is our intent, to do that.
Okay, thank you. Councilor Michaud?
Yes, Mr. Acton asked the question of traveling the area. I don't travel it frequently, but I do travel it probably maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks. I do follow the speed limits accordingly. It's no different than I live on King Street. Even there are residences. My concern is the details around that 25 left turns that they've noted in their report. To get a better understanding of that, did they actually monitor how many turns were made? There's 25 left turns, but how many turns were made at what times of day? Was it happening when the buses were there? where there are children leaving the buses and having to, I presume they're stopping almost every driveway, but there's a lot of information I think that needs to be discussed here. My other question is, what next? We've had residents in this area who've had concerns over the years. I hear a lot of questions and some answers, but what are we going to be prepared to do? Are we going to be prepared to temporarily reduce the speed until we address some of the questions of infrastructure? Do we need to widen the street? Do we need to extend the sidewalk? How are we going to address this? Are we going to address this with advising the RCMP to be policing the area more frequently? And I think the residents in the area deserve an answer to that. We've been patient. We found out that we have the ability to do this as a municipality. So let's give some peace of mind to the residents in the area and say, okay, here's what we're going to do and here's next steps.
Okay, thank you. There's no more comments. I see no more hands. Okay. So now we'll move on, and we have Mr. Acton has the next 4 topics, so we'll just let you go.
Thank you, Your Worship. Members of Council, as part of the 2021 capital budget process and also keeping up with our fleet maintenance program, we were looking to replace the 2012 Dodge 1-ton truck and salt hopper. So we put together tender number 2021-01, the supply of one latest model 1-ton truck and dump box and salt hopper. And this was issued on February the 5th, 2021. There were 7 plan takers or packages picked up during the process. And during the tender opening on March 16th, in council chambers, we received 1 tender bid, and that tender bid is included. The tender result was evaluated and the completeness of the tender was accepted. The tender bid was from Amherst Chrysler Limited of Nova Scotia for the 1-ton and dump body and salt hopper. And it was broken into 2 options. So one was the truck itself and one was the salt hopper, but the total price was $113,187.37, HST included. And again, you can see the breakdown there between the truck and the salt hopper. The capital budget amount for the new 1-ton dump truck and dump body and salt hopper was $84,910.73, HST included. As per most of our surplus equipment, the existing 2012 Dodge 1-ton truck and dump body, along with the salt hopper, will be sold at a local auction to help offset the difference in the cost. And we reached out to Ritchie Brothers just to give you an indication of what they felt it was worth. They had indicated it was worth at least $20,000. We feel that it's worth actually more than that, but we would be looking to put that through the auction and obviously use the resale of that to pay for the overage that were on this budget item. So it would be our recommendation that council award tender 2021-01, supply of one latest model 1-ton truck and dump body and salt hopper to the lowest tender from Amherst Chrysler Limited in the amount of $113,187.37, just included. And I just wanted to point out that a motion will be coming forward next Monday night on the 12th of April. And the motion will also include the disposal of the surplus equipment in the same motion, because that is something that we typically have to come back to council. So you will see that motion that added to the motion to allow staff to dispose of the surplus equipment once we receive the new piece of equipment. I'd be open for any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Acton. Are there any questions? Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just a couple of questions. First of all, if the surplus equipment goes to auction and we aren't able to even get the $20,000 that the Ritchie's indicating would be the value that we could get from that, how do we look at paying for the difference that wasn't budgeted? 7 packages picked up, only 1 submission. That's a little concerning. I'm wondering what created the lack of interest to actually submit bids, and how desperate are we in the fact of replacing this piece of equipment right now, and do we have the option to go back to retender on it?
Mr. Acton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Michaud. With respect to the dollar value and the budget, we look at kind of our fleet management as a whole, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about this because we have some additional surplus equipment that would go to auction, and we also have some that were under budget, some that were over budget. So with the treasurer, we look at the fleet management of all of our fleet items as a whole, and we would be able to hopefully in the purchasing of all the fleet equipment come out in the positive. As far as the lack of bids, I was concerned about this as well. One of the problems that we encountered with this particular vehicle, as well as most trucks, if anybody out there has tried to purchase a truck in general, they're very difficult to come by, and a lot of the dealers they couldn't put when they could get the vehicle. So in other words, the lead time on these vehicles could be up towards a year, and they weren't comfortable in putting a bid in, not knowing when they could provide a vehicle. And that was the problem specifically with the 1-ton. And a lot of the dealers had indicated to us that they don't know when they can get a 1-ton, so they weren't comfortable in providing a bid on this. We were lucky enough to get one bid. Obviously, Amherst Chrysler may have had a lead on a 1-ton truck. Who knows? But that was the problem that not just us, but the industry is faced with right now, is that there are a shortage of trucks out there because there's a lot of trucks that are on the manufacturers in the manufacturer's inventory that are still waiting for parts because of the whole COVID situation. It's not a good situation, no matter whether you're into plumbing or heating or cars. They're having difficulty getting parts to be able to complete the construction of a lot of vehicles, and trucks is just another one of those. And as far as I think your next question was, can we retender? We can always retender. It's all written in the tender that we have the right to cancel the bid and not accept it. I'm just not sure if we rebid it another time. I don't know that unless it's several years from now whether the things are going to change with the industry and whether we'll ever be able to get any bids because of the shortage in trucks. And I think you had one other question in there as well.
Yeah, I've just was kind of wondering about the, well, I think you've covered them all. There was one thing about the, if we waited a year or if we waited longer, are we in desperate need to replace that vehicle right now?
Again, with continuing with our fleet maintenance program, I know I've worked with the treasurer to try to put a fleet maintenance package and plan together for our entire fleet. And the difficulty with, if we make changes on one particular item, then that throws everything off for next year and so on and so forth. So it's a bit of a snowball effect. And that's why whenever possible, we try to stick with our existing plan, which is to replace, I believe this one's every, I think 10 years, 9 to 10 years is most of our trucks are replaced every 9 to 10 years. Can you squeeze another year out of it? You might be able to, and then that's going to again cause a bit of a snowball effect for next year's budget items, because we're going to need to budget that when we were planning to budget for, let's say, another half ton or another piece of equipment, and then that one gets pushed off and so on. And then there may be a vehicle that you can't push off.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Akin. Are there any more questions? Seeing none, we'll move on to the tractor mowers. Mr. Akin again.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, as part of our capital budget process for 2021, and obviously keeping up with the fleet maintenance program, we're looking to replace the 2004 New Holland tractor mower and blower. This tender 2021-07, the supply one new four-wheel drive tractor mower with front end loader, front snow blower was issued on March the 2nd, 2021. There were 7 tender packages picked up during this process, and we received 3 tender bids during the tender opening on the 18th. And again, the tender results are attached. We evaluated all of the 3 tenders, and they were all accepted. After the evaluation process, the low tender from Green Diamond Equipment Limited of Moncton, New Brunswick, for the four-wheel drive tractor without the cab, we again looked at a couple options for this: the tractor itself without a cab, with a cab, and the blower. And we are recommending the low bid from Green Diamond for the John Deere tractor without the cab and the snow blower. And you'll see the total there was $47,538.53, HST included. The capital budget amount for this new tractor and mower was $44,109, HST included. And again, we're looking to sell this New Holland tractor and blower, and it would be sold at a local auction. And again, the sale of this item would offset that difference, which I believe is about $3,000. And again, it would be our recommendation to go with the low bid for the tractor, four-wheel drive tractor, mower, loader, and front snow blower from Green Diamond in the amount of $47,538.53, HST included. And there would be a motion coming forward next Monday night, the 12th, and the same thing would apply. The motion would have on it the disposal of the surplus equipment once we receive the new piece of equipment. And I'd be happy to answer any questions, Your Worship.
Thank you, Mr. Akin. Are there any questions? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. Mr. Akin, about resurfacing.
Thanks again, Your Worship. Following the motion of council on March the 8th for the approval of the streets for the paving under the gas tax funding program, we put together the tender number 2021-05, the asphalt resurfacing of various streets, and it was issued on the March the 9th. The closing date for this tender was the 23rd of March. 7 tender packages were picked up during this process, and during the tender opening on the 23rd, we received 5 tender bids. And again, those tender bids are attached. After evaluation process, the lowest tender from Cost and Paving and Contracting Limited from Amherst, Nova Scotia for the streets approved by council, excluding Morgan Lane, was $315,071.25, HST included. And the reason I had indicated excluding Morgan is just to touch on the budget here for a second. The budget for 2021 under the gas tax funding was $423,500, HST included. But this budgeted item would include the paving of Morgan Lane. If you remember, we planned to do Morgan under a separate contract, but we allocate what we feel the paving is for that, and we use the gas tax fund to pave that. So that money that we allocated for that contract will come out of that contract, because council may be aware that we did get the funding for Queens Road and our designated highway, so we will be proceeding with that project and deferring Morgan for another year. So therefore, that money will come out. It will be added to the the gas tax funding that we can use under this particular contract. And we are looking to utilize the entire gas tax funding and spend the $423,500. So we would be looking to extend the streets that we're planning to, that council approved, to utilize all of that money. And I will say that the pricing came in quite a bit below last year's numbers, and that's why we actually have, we're able to do extra lengths of those streets, because the pricing was considerably cheaper than last year, which was a bit surprising, but a good surprise. So we would be recommending next Monday night that council award tender 2021-05 asphalt resurfacing to the lowest bidder, Cost and Paving, in the amount of $315,071.25, HST included. And we would also the motion would be brought forward during the regular council of the 12th, and the amount, the tendered amount, so we would be awarding it in the tendered amount and the addition of the quantities up to the maximum limit of the gas tax funding, so that we're able to spend all of the $423,500 with this particular contractor doing more of the streets that council has approved.
Okay.
Any questions?
Yeah, are there any questions? Seeing none, we'll move on then to the last item under Mr. Acton, the 3/4 ton truck with a plow.
Again, thank you, Your Worship. As part of the 2021 capital budget process again, and again, keeping with our fleet maintenance program, we're looking to replace the 2010 Dodge 3/4 ton truck and plow with tailgate spreader that the Parks and Facilities Department utilizes around the Civic Center and our parks areas. The tender for the 2021-06 supply of one new current model 4x4 3/4 ton truck, plow, and tailgate spreader was issued on March the 5th. There were 5 tender packages picked up during the process, and we received 2 tender bids during the opening on March the 24th. And those tender bids are also attached. Tender results were evaluated for completeness, and both tenders were accepted. And then after evaluation, the lowest tender from Lonsberry Chevaux Limited of Moncton for $66,049.15, HST included. The budget amount for this particular item was $71,677.89. So we're actually below budget, and this is where I was working with the treasurer in my earlier comments to be able to use, in this particular case, the extra money we have available here will go to pay for the underage that we were over on one of the other vehicles, which would more than cover one of those overage. So again, the surplus equipment would also be sold at a local auction, and again, the price and the money that we get for that sold truck would go back to offset any fleet differences. And it would be our recommendation again next Monday night to award the 2021-06 supply of one new current model 4x4 3/4 ton plow truck tailgate spreader to the lowest bidder from Lonsberry Chevaux in the amount of $66,049.15. And again, a motion would be coming forward next Monday night, and also include the disposal of the piece of equipment once we receive the new one at the local auction. Be happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Acton. Are there any questions?
Your Worship, if I could, just one comment. Also disappointed in the number of bids, but the same thing holds true with the 3/4 ton trucks. Some of the dealers just couldn't get their hands on, and most of our vehicles are what we call a fleet vehicle. So they literally come from the manufacturer. So they don't just take one off of a lot somewhere and give it to us. it comes directly from the manufacturer, and the manufacturers are telling us they've got vehicles there sitting in their yard that are not complete because they can't get all the parts for them. So that was probably another reason why we only received 2 bids on this particular item.
Okay, thank you. Okay, seeing no other questions, we'll move on then. Thank you, Mr. Acton. To number 9, Lansdowne easement, and Karen Miller.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Council may recall that in the summer of 2019, staff were contemplating some minor improvements to the pedestrian connection between Lansdowne Street and Main Street, so by the Sackville Curling Club. Staff wanted to complete paving on a small part near Lansdowne Street. However, it came to our attention that the connection was owned by Mount Allison University and not the town. As a result, we were unable to undertake the work until an agreement was in place. As council is aware, the town has maintained this connection for years, and it is a well-established pedestrian link in our community. The university has agreed to provide an easement to the town for the connection, along with recognizing several easements for existing sanitary sewer and storm sewer on and along portions of the Lansdowne practice field. This was originally brought to council in January 2020. This easement was not registered at the time, as there was debate back and forth with insurance clauses. The easement has been updated to reflect the same indemnity clauses that were found in the waterfowl park. Although the language has only slightly changed, a motion for the mayor and the clerk to sign the revised easement agreement is needed. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Okay, Councillor Evans.
Yeah. And sorry, I should have asked the engineer this at the liaison meeting, but if this easement gets signed, does that mean the work that was contemplated last year will be done? And can you, if the answer is yes, can you give some details as to what that is?
Mr. Acton?
Thank you, Your Worship, and thank you, Councillor Evans. With respect to the trail, again, if this is something that we can fit within our operating budget, because there was no capital budget that was budgeted for it, but we had planned to kind of take a bit of the steepness off that hill and kind of blend it down into Lansdowne. So I feel that that is something that we can definitely have a look at. And we have the equipment, the staff. It would require a bit of asphalt work, but it looks like we potentially could be able to do that this year under our regular operating budget.
Thank you, Mr. Acton. Any more questions? Okay, if not, we'll move on then to the community garden and Matt Pride.
Thank you, Your Worship. As council's aware, the Sackville Community Garden has been operating for many years down on Charles Street. Originally, the garden was an initiative of Renaissance Sackville, but since then, the Sackville Community Garden has formed their own committee, and Renaissance does still support the garden by funding their insurance, but otherwise they're their own entity. The last time council discussed the community garden's usage of the town property on Charles Street was back in 2013, and at the time there was a motion made to permit the garden to operate there for 5 years until the end of May in 2018. There was no actual formal agreement created. Over the last couple of years, with the status of Renaissance Sackville seemingly in flux, staff felt it was best to wait to revisit the usage agreement until we had a better understanding of the community garden sustainability overall, should Renaissance Sackville no longer be able to provide them with support. Now that they have a committee in place, we felt that it was appropriate to develop a more formalized agreement, which you can see attached, that would permit the community garden to remain on town property for the next 7 years until 2028. So the recommendation of rec programs and events would be to have council permit the deputy mayor and town clerk to sign and seal the attached agreement, and that'll be put forward at the next regular council meeting on Monday. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I'm just looking at the agreement here. I just wanted to get some clarification. Is that community garden space utilized in the wintertime? I just see that one of the notations is that snow plowing of Charles Street and the premises as required by the municipality. I'm not sure why it would state Charles Street as a whole and that premises, unless the premises itself was used in the wintertime. And the other one is on the reverting the condition of the property to its original if the community garden ceased to use the property. What is that based on? Is that based on what it is now, or is that based on what it was when the community garden first started utilizing the property? Could I get some explanation on that?
Sure. As far as the snow clearing goes, the community garden does not generally offer services or programs during the wintertime, but that doesn't mean that they couldn't. So they do have the bake oven there, for example, and they might be interested in making use of that. So we felt that it was good to put that piece in there so that they understood that it is town property and it's our responsibility to provide snow clearing services there should they need them, so that they wouldn't be bringing their own plow in, for example. The second piece of second part of your question around returning the state of the property back to its original state would be back to when they first started a long time ago. So there is another piece in the agreement that says that should they leave anything on the property, that the town of Sackville has then has the ability to do what they will with that. So if they were to leave the shed there, for example, or the bake oven, then the town could make use of that how we saw fit. So that we did have that second piece in there to kind of cover off should they not be able to return it back to the original state.
Thank you.
Just further on the snow plowing, it states Charles Street though, and I'm just want clarification. Why would it state the entire street when it's just the parking area that they would utilize?
I can't really say for sure. I guess it's the town's responsibility to plow that street. So we just put that in there. I mean, it could probably be removed just as easily, honestly, but we're just kind of covering all of our bases.
Okay, thank you. Are there any more questions for Mr. Pride? Councillor Evans.
And I hadn't thought of this before, but is this agreement just formalizing something that was done before? This is not, this is the first formal agreement. Is that correct? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, correct. In the past, there was a motion that council passed. The last time was in 2013. Ron Corbett was involved, and I think Councillor Tower actually seconded that motion. And it was just a motion that basically stated that they could use that property for 5 years, and that they needed to provide us with some liability insurance and a couple other small pieces. So yeah. A more formal agreement just lays out their responsibilities and liabilities.
No, I just want to know if I could add this to my list of professionalization of our operations. I really like this.
Thank you.
Sure can.
Okay, if there are no more questions, I see none. I'll move on to item 11 and the Sackville Farmers Market and Kieran Miller.
Thank you, Your Worship. Council has received 2 recent presentations regarding a permanent home for the farmers market. Garth Zwicker presented a proposal for a permanent farmers market on Mallard Drive on February 1st, and Kent Coates presented on behalf of the Farmers Market Board on March 1st. I will present a summary of staff's evaluation of the proposals, but a copy of the full report is available by request. So I'll begin with Mallard Drive. Mr. Zwicker's proposal was for a week-round permanent farmers market building on a town-owned property on Mallard Drive across from the Visitor Information Center. He is proposing that the land be transferred or leased to a board of directors and that council appoint him as a project leader. While staff agree with Mr. Zwicker on the need for a permanent home for the farmers market, there are some issues with his proposal, the main ones being financing, the operational model, and location. A project of this scale will be considered a special capital project. The only way the town is able to qualify for capital borrowing to fund a special project is if the use of the capital request is for municipal purposes and owned by the municipality. The Municipal Capital Borrowing Board will reject the application if the town isn't the owner and the building is not being used for municipal functions. In terms of operations, it is not possible to transition land to a board that doesn't exist yet. If the land is given away, then the town cannot invest capital in it. Mr. Zwicker is proposing that he would be responsible for funding applications. However, an individual does not have the authority to bind the town in a legal agreement, and if the applications are in the name of the town of Sackville, approval from council will be required. The proposed site on Mallard Drive is accessible from exit 504, and there are advantages to a highway commercial area, such as visibility and parking, especially for visitors from out of town. However, the Sackville Farmers Market has historically been held in the downtown, and previous consultations with the existing Farmers Market Board have indicated that the preference is to remain in the downtown. In terms of policy, the downtown business district encourages a range of cultural, artistic, and recreational uses and businesses aimed at serving the local population. Therefore, from a policy perspective, the municipal plan supports a farmers market in the downtown over the highway commercial area. Now we'll move on to the presentation from the Farmers Market Board. Kent Coates' proposal on behalf of the Farmers Market Board was not for a specific site. Instead, it was for a vision of what a partnership with the town to construct a permanent farmers market building could look like. The board lacks the capacity to construct and operate a facility at the required scale and identifies a potential partnership with the town as a solution. The board proposed that the town and Sackville Farmers Market Incorporated could enter into a long-term lease and that the board would be responsible for operating costs and day-to-day operations of the market. In the board's presentation, a permanent home for the farmers market will be a multi-use space with different users throughout the week, such as a community food bank, performing arts groups, and recreation space. While the proposal presented touches on some important concepts such as a multi-use building, town programming, and a downtown location, it was very high level without too much detail, and staff would require more information to move forward. Now I'll finish with the recommendation. So both presentations correctly identify the need for a permanent home for the farmers market. However, it is staff's recommendation that we need to consider the big picture, and any future building should be multi-use and serve a variety of organizations. The COVID-19 pandemic and associated shutdowns has shown that there is a significant need for multi-purpose town-owned community spaces that staff can program, administer, and operate. Many community groups were left without space to operate when churches and schools had to close due to lack of staff resources and sanitizing capabilities. A motion was passed by council allowing managers to work with local groups and provide free space as needed. However, with limited space, there was only so much that could be accommodated. A multi-use building designed to be flexible and adaptive could potentially address a permanent location for the farmers market and the need for town-owned recreation space. And when we say recreation space, we're talking about a range of activities and programs such as sports, theater, arts, music, all kinds of things that would serve all age groups. It is important to note that a permanent home for the farmers market or new indoor recreation space have not been identified as a priority of council, nor have they been included in the town's 2021 budget. Any such project needing municipal funding would best be pursued in 2022. At this time, it is staff's recommendation that we explore the idea of a multi-use building in the downtown and complete a Class D estimate to determine a baseline of what a building like this might cost. This would help inform future decision-making and budgeting at a minimal cost. Community consultation would be an important part of any process for a permanent location for the farmers market. Thank you.
Thank you, Karen. Are there any questions, comments? Councilor Evans.
Thank you. First of all, I want to repeat something I've said many times. I think the farmers market is a huge asset and enhances the quality of life in Sackville. And in terms of process, I really like that it was pointed out that council has not yet established that determining a permanent location for the farmers market is a priority. I happen to think that it would be, and if I got reelected, I would be happy to talk about this when we do our priority establishing next year. And my last point is I definitely agree that consulting, and I'm reading here, that consulting with the farmers market board, member vendors, and the marketing public would be an important part of any process for a permanent location for the farmers market. Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Evans. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. First of all, I just want to thank Mr. Zwicker and Mr. Coates for making the efforts to bring these ideas forward. You know, it gives more for the community to think about. I think it's important that the community is engaged, and to see somebody step forward that has really no association with the current board to bring these type of thoughts forward is important. The fact of community consultation is an important piece. I think it needs to go beyond just consultation. I think it needs to have a full-fledged involvement. There's some components within the proposal, and I'll ask staff about those kind of after the fact, but just some comments on sanitary sewer issues on Mallard Drive and lift stations being required, and other factors like that, because you know, if we're looking at that as highway commercial and possible future development, specifically when you have a building that's up for sale in that area now, if the infrastructure is not there to support, then we should be looking at making improvements in the area, depending on development in that area. But that's something I can follow up with staff further just to get more information. I'm supportive of the fact of moving something multi-purpose ahead here that would accommodate not only a farmer's market, but other entities within our community, and also should involve a broad audience of consultation and involvement.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tower.
Thank you, Worship. I have to agree with a lot of what Councillor Michaud said there, and I definitely agree with Councillor Evans that farmers market permanent home should be one of our targets to achieve. And of course, if I get reelected, I would be more than willing to push forward and work with Councillor Evans or any councillor. But I also feel that, as Councillor Michaud says, that it should be a publicly driven one. They were both great ideas of making a building to work within. Very similar, one more in depth. One great thing about, I guess, Mr. Zwicker's, he chose that area up there, but he did say that his first choice was down in the Bill Johnson Memorial Park, which would mean basketball courts or something along that line. But I think as a public, we need to draw into this. So taking some people who are part of the board, taking the public out there. There's been lots of people who have written emails saying that they support the idea, think town should also support it. So if we could get a committee, mayor's advisory committee, or just a community committee for establishing a home, a permanent home for the farmers market, so that it become more vibrant. And I think they should be the ones who look into this and come back with using some staff to help them to come back with the proposal to the new council, and then go forward. But I think we really need the public involved with this. And I don't think either proposal should be tossed aside. I think they should be both drawn together if possible and come up with the best options. Thank you.
And thank you, Councillor. Councillor Finney.
I was going to say to Ms. Miller, as a matter of fact, I'm going to recommend that actually you contact the town of Shediac. Their community center down there is out of this world. I've noticed it many years ago. I have to tell you, I know what it cost them at the time. It was $4 million. But the thing is the way it's so versatile, it's like it's unbelievable, as a matter of fact. Number of years ago, before we sold the old fire hall, I wanted to tear it down and recommended that we build a community center there because we're in dire need of it. There's no doubt about that. We need a place where we can have the plays and we can have the recreation for the kids and for the seniors to go to. But I'm certainly going to recommend that you contact the town of Shediac, even take a drive down, get a tour of the building, and you'll really see exactly what I mean. And then while you're down there, maybe you can touch base with Dominic LeBlanc, if he's not in Ottawa, and remind him that I believe he was quite helpful in getting that community center for Shediac, that maybe he should consider also working on behalf of Sackville. And I'm sure he would probably help us out with some funding, finding some funding somewhere. So just a little information for you, Kieran, and I hope that helps. And if you have any questions, let me know, and I'll be more than happy to help you. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Seeing no more hands raised. Oh, sorry, Karen.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry, I just wanted to clarify one item in the report. So the report in the recommendation, it references a Class B estimate, but it should be a Class D as in dog estimate.
Okay, thank you.
What's the difference?
Your Worship, if I could.
Can you explain the difference between the two? Somebody?
Yes. Your Worship, if I could. Okay, thank you. The difference between a Class B and a Class D is the amount of detail. A Class D, you would typically just be looking for kind of an overall concept, and it would come along with, okay, we want a building that's roughly this big and it's going to have metal siding and we want concrete floor and a few things like that. A Class B is one step closer to going to tender. So you have conceptual drawings. So you've paid a consultant, considerable fees to provide you with those details, and you've worked out a lot of the nitty-gritty details, and that therefore you've come up with a Class B. And as I said, the next step to a Class B would be a Class A, which would be ready to go to tender. So D is more just a budgetary number, ballpark figure based on some initial concept, but no drawings, no conceptual drawings, none of that. Okay.
Okay, thank you. Okay, then we'll, with that, we'll move on to Healthy Community Initiative Grant and Karen Miller again.
Giving Dwayne a run for his money for most items in a row. Thank you, Your Worship. Staff have been advised of a funding opportunity through the Canada Healthy Communities Initiative for projects that respond to identified needs arising from the impacts of COVID-19. Proposals are eligible under 3 streams. 1, create safe and vibrant public spaces. 2, improve mobility options. And 3, provide innovative digital solutions to connect people and improve health. The minimum funding amount for projects is $5,000 up to a maximum of $250,000. The total funding available for the Atlantic region is $1.4 million. The program provides 100% of the funding, so matching municipal funds is not required. Submissions are due by June 25th, 2021. Prior to submitting a proposal, staff felt it would be prudent to discuss potential projects with council. Staff have identified the following potential projects which align with town priorities. The first would be a parking area with amenities on Walker Road to serve the different trails there, and an accessory step tracker rental program. The second idea is a downtown decorative lighting program and an event power source for public events in the parking lot next to Goya's. And the third idea is a dog park at Beach Hill Park. Staff are looking for a general consensus from council regarding a proposed project before proceeding with the necessary application. Thank you.
Thank you, Kieran. What form do you see this consensus taking?
You guys tell us what idea you like.
Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I was just thinking this is really the kind of thing that the new council should, I think, this is going forward, we'll have time. I have ideas and opinions, but I think it would be best if we postponed this until we had a new set of councillors. That's, I mean, I'm not voting against it.
Big deadline with this.
It's June.
Yeah, okay. Anyone else? Mr. Burke.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I guess just one point, I guess, is that waiting for till after the municipal election is certainly something that we've discussed. I guess the issue for us is that we need to hustle an application together. And my fear is that if we wait for the incoming council to sit in June, that is not going to give us much time to turn around a professional style application that we would typically look to submit. So where this is 100% external funding, we thought this would be an appropriate time to identify a modest sized project and proceed based on something that was well aligned, and we would almost be in a position to spring an application in fairly quickly.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Tower, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just curious, Kieran, do you have any idea of the approximate price tag of the parking area with amenities on Walker, or the downtown decorative lighting, which I hope, would, you're saying a power source, so you're not looking at possibly green or solar, but you're thinking of electrical. So have you any approximate price tags on those things?
Ms. Miller?
Through you, Deputy Mayor. No, we haven't gone too far down the rabbit hole on any of these until we have some direction as to where council would like to see us go.
Okay. I like what Councilor Evans says, that this should be something for the new council, but I definitely go along with Mr. Burke that if this is time sensitive, the next council would have to decide rather quickly on it. But that might also give you a chance at that point to find approximate price tags for any one of these. I think the idea of the parking area, the amenities up by Walker Road, and let people have step trackers to see how far they're walking is a good thing. So, which adds into what we want people to do in this town. At the same time, I think the downtown part is awesome. So, I think you've got them in the right order, because I would put dog park last personally. But I still think if it went to the next council, it'd be one of the very first things they would have to decide upon. And I understand that's a problem for staff, because you'd be limited in what but it would also give you a chance to have a price tag of what you're going to be applying for and have everything ready so it can be presented with a new council, and then they could say, yes, go for it, and you could leap forward. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Michaud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just looking at this, from what I'm hearing publicly, the trails in that upper Walker Road area have become very popular, especially during the pandemic, and that seems like something reasonable to tackle. Decorative lighting, I mean, we're getting an awful lot of positive feedback in regards to the decorative lighting that took place in the downtown over the holidays, and trying to find a means to extend that. We know what is faced, I'm sure staff does, with event power sources in that parking lot when we are doing our fall fair event. So, those seem like legitimate things that could be tackled without really having to put this on a future council. One thing that piqued my interest is providing innovative digital solutions to connect people. So I'm just kind of wondering what might fall on that. I know we've had conversations in the past of making more available Wi-Fi in our downtown core. So is that something that would fall within that? And we've become a society now with the pandemic that relies on that those digital solutions or connection. And is there opportunity maybe to look at something there?
Okay, thank you, Councillor Butcher.
Sorry, I always feel like it takes me so long to put down my hand and then put on my microphone that you might think I'm not paying attention and don't know it's my turn. I knew it was my turn. The problem that I find always happens when staff has some suggestions of great ideas is that they're always all really great ideas. As someone who has used the area up on Walker Road a lot, I am well aware of how congested it is up there. So I have two questions. One is in regards to that specifically. Does the town already own enough land up there to put up a parking lot, or would we be looking at a land purchase in that? And it said that there was 1.4 million available, but do you get any feeling about, is there a better chance of getting money if it's something that is going to cost us, 15 grand? Or does that matter? Like, what if we apply for something that's almost to the full amount, like that would involve purchasing land and all of that kind of thing? Is there less chance we'd get that than if we choose something that is a smaller amount? I'm wondering if you have any feel for that.
Mr. Acton or Mr. Beal, whoever, is the land up there ours?
Yes, it is.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burke.
Thank you, Your Worship. I guess just to pick up on one point that Councillor Butcher mentioned, which was the, focusing, I guess, on property that we own. We know that acquiring land takes a significant amount of time. And the, I guess the downtown Wi-Fi project is something that we discussed when we were preparing for this report. And I guess we felt that that type of project is going to need more lead time than just a couple of months. Where do you house the infrastructure? Sourcing it, a lot of those types of questions that we felt that's probably a project for another day. And that's why we kind of stuck with these three that we know we could probably get estimates and proposals in fairly quickly to meet the deadline. And just lastly, in terms of the overall budget, another valid point where though that's also why we've suggested the three types of projects that you have before you tonight, that we know the dog park budget was $80,000. So that's kind of the budget number that we were thinking about when we pulled these three projects together, knowing that depending on which one it is, it may be slightly more, but it could be considerably less. And which we think would increase our chances of leveraging a fairly decent sized amount of money to do a really great project for the community.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burke. If I can chime in here on this, I kind of like the parking area on Walker Road. I've driven by there on some weekends this winter, and it's been kind of congested with cars on the side of the road. And I think as I read through these and I looked at the funding criteria from this initiative, I think that one probably fits the best within what they're looking for. That was kind of the impression I had. So I would think, just on a quick reading of it, that would stand the best chance of success. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I want to acknowledge that my suggestion of postponing it has been, I've been convinced that I understand why we'd be doing it now, and I would go with that of the three, I would pick that one first as well.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Butcher.
I just wanted to echo Councillor Evans, although I think this would be a great thing for the new council to decide. We don't have time for that. And the reason I feel, in my not at all professional opinion, that one of the reasons we're successful with things that we apply for is because our staff puts the time and energy into doing them right. So I want to make sure that they have the time that they feel they need to put in a quality proposal that will hopefully have a better chance of getting us the results we want. So I don't think that we should be putting it off. I think that although it would be nice for the new council to do this, I think it needs to be done sooner. And I like the Walker Road one the best too.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Burke.
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. In I guess contemplating, I guess, the direction from council in terms of a project. Sometimes when we come across grant applications, they do ask if council has supported the application. Where we're unfamiliar with this one, we probably will look to advance a resolution on next Monday night, just to get council to authorize the submission, just in case we need it. And if, we're hearing correctly, we would look to, if council's okay with that, we would look to advance the Walker Road proposal. I know we've had several conversations with the Tantramar Outdoor Club. They've identified that as a need. We see that being advantageous for us as a community to try and help draw people down to get outside and enjoy some of the extensive trails that we were lucky to have in the community. So if council's on board with that, we'd look to have a motion for next Monday night, authorizing the mayor and clerk to sign whatever necessary papers would be required for such an application. And rest assured, the incoming council will have an opportunity in the future for these types of applications. We had one for the Canada 150. As you may recall, they will pop up from time to time, and we would look to approach it the same way and get their input before running off and making an application of this nature.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Evans, or Tower, sorry.
Thank you, Worship. Yeah, as I've read just a little bit further, but I missed it when it was being presented. If it's not going to really, it's 100% grant for the project, so why should we wait at all? We're not putting on something that council's got to worry about. So, and as I say, I like the order she put it in, and I'm glad everybody's saying, yeah, Walker Road, because I think it is the best one. So I think it's a great idea that don't wait, let's do it. Why wait for spring? We're there now.
Thank you. Okay, Karen, I think you have the direction. With that, we'll move on to council devices and Mike Beal.
Thank you, Your Worship. So we've had a discussion over some time relating to town-owned devices being provided for mayor and council. Discussion has happened at our information technology meeting, user group meeting held with Mount A. So over time, security for municipalities has become more and more critical, with breaches happening more frequently. This is described in the attached report from Mount A IT department. I'm not going to go through the entire report, of course, but they do outline the security issues that have happened with a number of municipalities in particular. This is what we had asked them. I will go through the 4 examples. The 2 Ontario municipalities, Midland and Wasaga Beach, were hit in 2018 with issues. St. John municipality learned of a malware attack on its parking fine server in December of 2018. In 2019, ransomware attack struck Stratford and Woodstock, Ontario again, and as well as 3 hospitals. And most recently, the one that's been in the news recently and locally is, again, the city of St. John was targeted in November 2020. This time it was a ransomware attack that caused the city to shut down services and rebuild from scratch. Just recently on that one, a CTV News article indicated that $17 million was the requested funding that was being requested to be paid in Bitcoin, and the city ended up rebuilding their network for an estimated cost of around $3 million. So we've looked at this, and we feel that it is necessary to provide staff with town-owned devices that our IT department service, and we feel it's beneficial that the mayor and council, the incoming council, are also provided for several reasons, as I had already talked about. Using town device for the town work is more secure. Again, it's highlighted in the attached report. Using a town device for town work will allow Mount A IT, who have a contract with, to service and provide support on devices that we own. Providing service and support on one type of device rather than 9 different ones is critical. I guess we found this last year, or last election, when we had some training going on our Office 365 systems, and we had mayor and council with 9 different types of devices, and they were trying to explain how each of them worked, and it was very difficult. Training, as noted, training would be easier for mayor and council to provide the device, and also with regards to regular updates to ensure the security of the devices and ensure that there is passwords and protection on the devices that are provided to mayor and council, just as we have with our laptops. So we have multi authentication with our laptops that managers have. So you have to enter, basically the hard drive is locked down until you enter a secure code to get into it. So if a laptop was lost or stolen, then nobody would be able to get into it because the hard drive would be encrypted without knowing that code that needs to be entered. We did reach out to other municipalities through the AMENB listserv, to which only a few had responded, but municipalities that did respond and said they did provide devices were Village of Fredericton Junction, City of Campbellton, and Town of Grand Bay Westfield. Nobody had replied and said they didn't, so it was a small sample size. Mount A has looked at the types of devices and have recommended Microsoft Surface tablets as the device of choice, which will coincide with the use of our Office 365 and our SharePoint devices. We are somewhat protected already with the cloud, but this would further protect our device, our files and our systems, as noted, with having the same types of devices and having them secure, operating municipal systems. We've put together a cost estimate for providing 9 devices, 9 Microsoft Surface tablets. A quote from CDW was around $8,500 for the tablets, which included the keyboard and case. So we as staff are recommending through and be look for a resolution at April 12th to authorize the providing of tablets for the incoming mayor and council to be provided and serviced through our Mount A IT contract that we have at the cost noted of approximately $8,500.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Beal. In your report, it says price change as of April 1st. Is that going up or down?
Likely it will go up. We will have in preparation for the motion to have a more secure and firm quote issued in the next day or two.
Okay, thank you.
It shouldn't fluctuate much, but at the beginning of each month, the computer price, Microsoft adjusts their computer prices accordingly.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions? Councilor Michaud.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Just in regards to the company that Mount Allison IT reached out to, are there other companies that they do business with that can provide the similar device at a similar cost? And my other question is that with are these devices compatible for a counselor to utilize from home through Teams as opposed to using their personal devices at home? My last question is on accessibility from outside town hall. Would council still be required to secure their own internet connection in order to participate remotely?
Yes, so I guess to start with the first one, we have a corporate account with CDW, and they have provided us the best pricing for normally provides the best pricing for hardware of this type. We use company direct dial for all our printers, They've, again, a corporate account who provides us the best pricing. From time to time, we will reach out and look and make sure that we are still obtaining the best pricing. And CDW, through our corporate account, would be able to provide us the best pricing on the Surface tablets at this point in time. We would verify it just to make sure, again, as we've moved into April, that it is the best pricing. The second one is it serves just like a laptop. It's a tablet, but it serves just like a laptop. It will connect to Wi-Fi. It has USB ports as well, so it can be used just like a laptop. It does have a camera as well, so yes, you would be able to connect to it through your Wi-Fi at home, and that's what should be used for meetings. Would be that specific device, a town issued device, and it would be understood that the town data, town email would not be stored on personal devices, but would be stored on the town provided corporate device that each councillor would have and use. The third one, there has been no discussion at this point in time of the town paying for councillors' Wi-Fi connections at home. That would be something that would have to be adjusted through probably through the bylaw governing council remuneration if that was added.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Evans.
Yeah, I guess I want to talk about the last point that the treasurer raised, but I just want to start off by saying that by default, I accept recommendations from staff unless I have compelling reasons not to do so. And so I understand the benefits of standardization. I understand the benefits of the additional security we get. So I'm good with this recommendation. With regard to the last point that the treasurer made, a key part or one of the rationales for getting equipment like this is so that we'd be able to participate from home. And as Councillor Michaud alluded to, you can't do that without internet access. And so we're all expected to have telephones, even though it doesn't say anything anywhere. I think that recent events have brought to light the fact that not every councillor has internet access, and you can't use this device unless you do. And so I think it would not be unreasonable to require councillors to ensure that they're paid money to do the job, and having internet access is a requirement to do the job. And so I think that we need to make sure that every councillor has internet access. We're already paid to do the job. I don't think we need a special allowance to get internet access, just like we don't get an allowance for telephone or a car. We understood what the job requires and we do it. So I think that's part and parcel. I support the motion, but having a device at home is not going to do you any good if you don't have internet access.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Finney.
Michael, with this inclusion, is the cost of our contract going to go up?
No, it will not. We pay an annual fee, and that requires them to provide us the necessary IT requirements throughout it. They already service on a monthly basis all of our laptops and computers that are provided to staff. They already provide us with tech support. That we do have warranties on a lot of our items, of course. So they come in, do the initial investigation, would then make the call to Dell or to Microsoft, whoever the computer is purchased through, and the warranty would be enabled. Anytime we have issues, we do already call them. But no, there would not be any additional fees paid to Mount Allison as a result of this.
Michael, if I remember correctly, when we were going to open this building, your recommendation was the fact that all of council should be equipped with laptops or tablets plus cell phones. It's kind of funny how all of a sudden, so many years later, we're now bringing this forward to have it done. But during that time, there were certain councillors that didn't think that the town should pay for laptops for councillors. So kind of ironic, isn't it, how things come all the way around to present day. And but in all honesty, do I agree with this? Yes. So I guess I'll leave it at that right now. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor.
The last thing I will say, Your Worship, sorry to interrupt, is that we did budget for this in 2021.
Okay, thank you. Okay, that brings us to the end of the public agenda. We now have our question period.
No.
And I will ask those of you who, in the public who wish, sorry?
Excuse me, Your Worship, there is one more item, item 14 on the public agenda.
Oh, I am sorry. Yeah, you're right.
Thank you.
Mr. Beal.
I'm going to turn this one over to the Assistant Treasurer to do this report.
Thank you, Ms. Hartling.
Thank you, Your Worship, members of council. This RFQ is for the provision of fuel services at the pump, which closed December 2nd, 2020. We've received 2 bids, 4 staff members, being the treasurer, Michael Beal, engineer, Dwayne Acton, the superintendent of public works, Michelle Sherwood, and myself, all met after independently evaluating the criteria, which was based on price discount, operations and availability, payment options, tracking system, and additional value added. Scoring for the 2 bids is seen in the document, and the average score of them were of both of the bids, which were Sackville Esso and Parkland Corporation, the Ultramar, were 83 and 73. The difference for that was mainly due to Esso providing 24-hour service, which is necessary for operations. This RFQ shall be in effect for 3 years with the option to extend for a further 2 years. And it is a staff recommendation that we maintain our fuel services with the Sackville Esso. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions, comments? Councilor Michaud.
A couple of questions. First question is Parkland Corporation, are they located here in the municipality, and what company that would be or what fuel source that would be? And the other one is the report states that this closed December 2nd. We're 4 months later now. I'm wondering if this matrix and the scoring would still be applicable, or has anything changed? Would it be to the better, to the worse? Price discount, etc. I mean, that's a long time frame here, and I'm curious about that.
Ms. Hartling.
Thank you, Your Worship. First question, Parkland Corporation is the Ultramar, and it is local. As for the second, I don't believe anything has changed. The treasurer may want to verify that. The price discount remains the same, and everything else is according to the RFQ stated that it was in effect, I believe, until April, at least till the end of April. I may be mistaken. Michael Beal may be able to clarify more of that.
Yeah, you are correct. We had a long time period allowance now. The RFQ is not a price that we're going to pay at the pump, but rather a discount we receive on the pump price at said time that we purchase it. So in the end, as has been the case since we've been purchasing fuel, the pump price is what the pump price is, and we get a cost per liter discount off of that. So if today the price is $1.24, then we would get the price per liter off when we get our bill. And if tomorrow it's $1.19, we would get the same price per liter off of that. So the economy of scale doesn't matter to what the pump price actually is.
And with the Parkland Corporation, so what are the requirements in regards to 24 hours availability? Is it having somebody available or at the location, or is it accessibility to the pump and being having it automated for the municipality to use.
Yeah, for the RFQ, they were asked to provide. Do you provide 24-hour, 7-day service? And if not, are you able to provide 24, 7-day service? So the scorings came about as a result of them answering the question. So the SO is open 24/7. The Parkland is not, as we know, and their answer to their question was that it is not available. So we had looked. We don't know when we're going to need to put fuel in vehicles due to snowstorms, due to fires that may happen, things out of our control, and that was within the scoring matrix. I do believe 30% was on operation availability.
Okay.
So they would have had an opportunity to provide us with how they could have provided 24/7 service within the proposal.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Finney.
Michael, as a matter of fact, there's one other company in town, as a matter of fact, and I'm just wondering, have they ever put in an offer to provide service? Because they are open 24 hours too, and that's Irving, what I'm talking about. So.
Yep. Yeah, so all three, they had provided a bid in the past on this, but all three local fuel establishments were provided a copy of the RFP and given the opportunity to bid. So we only received 2 on closing. So for some reason, Irving chose not to submit a bid.
Just one other question, Mike. How long have we been with ESO?
Since 2017, January.
Yeah, that was the RFQ, and we had switched back and forth a few times before that.
And who were we with before then?
I do believe we used the Ultramar for a little while. Dwayne, you can correct me if I'm wrong. And we did use ESO, and then there was also a time that we actually had to go to the Yallock Big Stop to get fuel during a major event as well. So
is that why we asked to have 24-hour service? Because of course the Ultramar wouldn't be able to provide it at that time, and then of course we'd have to travel all the way over to the Big Stop. So is that why we've turned around and asked that 24-hour service be provided?
We asked for 24/7 service. And if not, how could you provide availability to us, being able to garner fuel in the event that the major reasons being, if we're in the middle of the night fighting a major fire, the fire department, and they need to fill their tanks, how would they be able to do that? Plus, if we're or in the weekend or any time in the weekend as well, we looked at the potential for snow clearing equipment needing to be filled up overnight, early morning, due to snow clearing or cleaning up of the downtown or anything as such. So we did ask that, do you provide 24/7, and if not, how could you provide us that availability?
Okay, thanks, Mike. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, I don't see any. We'll now move on to the question period. And I'll ask those of you who wish to, in the public, who wish to ask a question to unmute your microphones and turn on your cameras. And when you're done with the question and the response, please turn them off again. So if anyone wishes to ask a question, would you do so, indicate so by raising your hand. Wendy.
Mayor and Council, I do have a question just on the fuel RFQ that you just talked about. One of the criteria you just stated was that you have to have 24/7 access or service. Was there any consideration taken into what if the power goes out? So do they have access? Do they have a generator that they could provide fuel at the SO? I know the Ultramar does. That's why I'm asking.
Mr. Beal?
Yeah, the scoring matrix allowed for operations and availability, so all those criteria were taken into account. And as noted, the four staff members who did score it were required to score it all independently. So There was basically that prevented all of us from getting together and putting our own scoring. So they were scored independently, but it did allow for value as well. Value added would have also generated scoring as well for being able to provide the generator.
Okay, so there was a specific question on the generator?
Would have been within operations and availability.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Goodrow.
Good evening. Thank you, Council, for bringing up the speed limit issue on Pond Shore. It is a major concern of the neighborhood for sure. Can I ask how much the report was that was done?
Mr. Burke.
Your Worship, I direct that to Mr. Acton. He retained WSP.
All right, Mr. Acton.
Assuming I'm allowed to give that information out, I assume.
I believe so.
Yeah, I don't have the exact amount here, but I can tell you it was between $3,000 and $4,000.
I think it left out some important issues. First of all, I don't think any of the local residents were contacted to get input. I know I wasn't. It didn't look at the number of runners. There's a lot of Mount A students who use this in training, as well as town folks who run marathons or just enjoy running for sure. It is a popular route. They come up Pond Shore and loop around and go down Church and back in through town that way, and bikers as well. I know that the spring, the weight limits for large trucks is now in effect, but just prior to those going into effect, there's dozens of fully loaded tandem logging trucks that use this highway. They come from Shimagui, I believe, and so every day there's dozens of these trucks that go by and coming over the hill. The other thing that wasn't raised was the lack of signage. There are at least 2 blind hills in that stretch, and the signs were taken down a number of years ago for whatever reasons, but there's no signage, and certainly there's no signage for school bus stops or anything like that as well. I don't know. I think the town would be better off in doing their own research. I think Mr. Acton said that he has signs that are capable of recording the speeds, the actual speeds and the times of vehicles. And, you know, instead of hiring an outside firm, why doesn't the town itself take it upon themselves to do the study of Pond Shore and come to their own conclusion rather than basing the information on outside people?
Mr. Acton.
Sure. I mean, with regards to the, I'll start with the last question. I mean, I'm not a transportation engineer, so that's why we reached out to a consultant who does this for a living. That is what they do, and I believe it was the speed limit that was, I guess, in question. So. We never reached out to the consultant with respect to going door to door to canvas with respect to, I'm not sure what we would canvas because it wasn't part of the requirements that we put in for the consultant, and we were just having them evaluate the speed limit by looking at what speeds were there, the characteristics of the road, width of the road, and all those things is what was evaluated in order to determine whether the speed limit was accurate or not. That's what we asked them to do, and that's what they did for us. To do something outside of that is what was not what I thought to be the requirements, what we were doing this exercise for.
Yeah, but shouldn't the council take in the concerns of its residents? I mean, you know, we are very concerned as a neighborhood that something tragic is about to, or is going to happen on this road. And it's because of probably not the speed limit, but the number of speeders themselves. But certainly, you know, I think it would be just logical that you get some input from the residents. But thank you for your efforts, and I'm looking forward to seeing how you kind of resolve this.
You're on mute, Deputy Mayor.
Yeah, Lorianne Wesselby, please.
Hi. Just kind of as a follow-up to Dawn, I live directly on the Blind Hill. Have been here for 26 years. Have literally in the last year, my office window is facing the road. And just during this meeting alone, I've counted over 100 cars in the last hour and 15 minutes, just counting just out of, you know, curiosity. Like Dawn, there is a lot of concern with the speeders. There is also a lot of concern, you know, once the accident in question that happened a few years ago, which was my neighbor across the street, happened, there was a lot of RCMP around for a couple of weeks, and then it seemed to die off. There was lots of people being stopped. There was a lot of slowing down, but that visibility has now kind of left the area. I've been very concerned over the years, and actually I was one of the original ones complaining about the speed limit back in the day when the original signs were put up, when there was a Blind Hill sign and you know, they put the 50 sign up and they got stolen, they put new ones up, and then they deemed them that they were wrongfully put up. And I think it was Department of Transportation at the time had made the town remove them. So the concern I have is, you know,
Actually,
traveling.
Talk a minute. Do you have a question in here?
Yes. So the concern and the question I have is based on the speed that's going, you know, is there any infrastructure that's going to happen, like going forward, being looked into about sidewalks, about, you know, having it more safe for our area, lighting? It's a terrible area up here, and we seem to be kind of forgotten with the rest of the town. So I'm just wondering, is there anything that anybody has thought of going forward for this area? Because we are still in town limits, but we're kind of like the forgotten area.
Okay, Mr. Acton, can you answer that?
Thank you, Your Worship. As far as sidewalks go, there is no immediate plan for sidewalks unless that's a priority that council provides myself or staff. That's a council decision, but at this point there would be no, there was no plans for sidewalk. The sidewalk ends at, I believe it's Morris Drive, and we would have to extend it somehow across the bridge, which is problematic, and then continue that around, and the infrastructure is not there to do it. We'd have to fill in ditches in order to make enough room for a sidewalk, which means that we'd have to put a storm system in, and obviously the cost continues to rise. So that's a council decision on that. With respect to lighting, those are things that we can and would look at. This is news to me, but usually we have requests come in from residents if the lighting is not adequate. But we do have a bit of a policy for lighting. We usually have street lights on typically every second pole in that nature, but that is something that could be evaluated and looked at. I think somebody mentioned something with respect to signage. Again, given the direction from DTI that the municipality has the ability to look at signing, that is something that we have the ability to do now or will this summer, and that is something that could be looked at in the future for sure. Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll move on to Jennifer Campbell.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor, councillors and staff. As you can probably tell from my voice, this is not Jennifer, but it's Adam. I just, as a local resident of the road here, I just wanted to bring up a point and then ask a question. But we've lived here for 9 years. When we first moved in, we had young children. At the time, we didn't feel safe walking the road with a stroller, so we would load the kids and stroller into the truck and drive to a safer spot to walk the kids. Now that the kids are a little older and like to bike, we're about 200 meters away from the trail system, and we do the same thing. We load 4 bikes and 4 people into my truck to drive down to the trail at the lake to be able to access those things. The reason we do that is because of safety concerns. There are far more people driving past our house going above the speed limit than there are going below the speed limit. I can tell you that for sure. The only people I see below the speed limit are the occasional tractors. My question is, I heard the councillors say that really something should be done, that this point has been raised a few times before, and it is a safety concern. And I understand a study has been done kind of validating, I guess, the speed limit that's there. We have a blind corner on one end and a blind hill on the other end. And I think really the issue here is law enforcement and regulating that speed limit. And if the councillors could just commit to kind of calling the law enforcement and ensuring that they spend some time on the stretch road, I think that would temporarily at least help, and it would make me feel a little bit better and safer if that could be done.
Okay, yeah, we can. I can drop a note to the RCMP and ask them to step up enforcement up there. Okay, Erica Butler, please.
Hi there. Thanks for taking some questions. I had a question about process. After those discussions about speed limits on Pond Shore Road and also the street traffic bylaw, who now decides what motions will come forward at next week's council meeting regarding those issues? Like, who decides what the motions are and when they come forward?
Any councillor can put forward a motion if they so choose to, and simply by informing the clerk that they wish to put forward the motion. Or motions can come from the floor during other business. But generally, if a councillor wishes to make a motion, they have to notify the clerk before the meeting or during the meeting. They can, as we approve the agenda, they can request an addition to the agenda.
So regarding those 2 issues that were discussed tonight, will you just wait and see which councillors decide to make a motion regarding those?
That can happen. I can, I suppose it's not too far outside the authority of the chair to see if there's anyone interested in putting forward a motion. That would be a possibility. Mr. Burke?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I mean, we generally try to put a playbook together for council based on our special council meetings. So what we do is we take what we've heard from the discussion at these meetings, and then we look to put that package together for our regular meetings. So when we go into these meetings, we're not expecting councillors to make up motions on the fly. That's part of our job as staff, to make sure council has the information they need in advance. If they want to change a motion or advance a motion based on the information that, or lack of information that they've seen, that's what our role is, to kind of put that information in front of council so that they're ready to make decisions at a regular business meeting on the following Monday night.
Okay.
Just
can I ask another one?
For clarification, I can't make a motion as chair, so someone else would have to do that.
Okay. All right.
Do you have another question?
Yeah, if it's okay, sorry. So the report that WSP did for the town, did the town ask WSP to look at the safety issues on Pond Shore Road and sort of assess what might be done to help with that? Or did we just ask them to, apply the formula for what the standard speed limit would be on that road?
My impression is, and Mr. Atkin can correct me if I'm wrong, they were to look at the physical characteristics of the road, its elevation and so on, and to record the speed limits throughout the day, and how many cars are doing which speed limits.
Oh, okay, but they did recommend a speed limit, though, did they not?
Oh, they did, yes.
Okay, so they basically, we just asked them within the purview of speed limits. We didn't ask them about what should we do to the road to make it safer, anything like that.
No, I don't believe so.
Okay.
No, they were asked to evaluate the speed limits. And part of evaluating the speed limit, whether the speed limit was correct, because the request came in that the speed limit should be reduced. So the speed limit was evaluated. In doing the speed limit, they evaluated road characteristics, the number of vehicles, the speed of vehicles, and they applied industry standards which is with respect to the TAC guidelines as to what the speed limit should be on that stretch of designated highway. And that's where they came up with their recommendation based on that.
Right. Using the 85th percentile method.
Yeah.
And they don't use any other method besides 85th percentile?
They looked at the characteristics of the road, so the twists and the turns, the ups and the downs, the width of the street, the width of the shoulders, all of those things are evaluated and considered when they're evaluating speed for a given section. And obviously they look at what the speeds are, what people feel comfortable in traveling in that, and that's the 85 percentile. But all those other things were evaluated at the same time. It wasn't just the speeds and the number of vehicles, it was number of intersections, the width of the road, as I mentioned, the shoulders, number of driveways, all those things were evaluated in their evaluation of the current speed limit. And then from there, an evaluation and a recommendation was given on what the actual speed limit should be.
Okay. One more question, if I could.
Okay.
There's a surplus in gas tax funding versus the price of the current resurfacing projects, I gathered. So, and it seems that the town is proposing sort of adding more, like, I guess, length onto the projects that we're resurfacing this year. I was wondering if there would be consideration giving to like other transportation projects, such as like active transportation or road safety, or is there possibility, since we're getting more than we're getting more for our money, I guess, than we thought we would, if would the town consider branching out to do more than just road resurfacing?
I'll let Mr. Acton answer most of that, but it's my understanding that we put in a proposal for how we're going to use the gas tax money, and it's quite a bureaucratic procedure to change that. So, Mr. Acton?
Sure. That is correct, and I may get Mike to jump in here a little bit, but council also approved some time ago that the gas tax funding would go towards repaving. So I believe that would be an issue in changing midstream on where that gas tax funding would go. And there is a process that has to go through, and we went through that. We submitted what we were going to do with the money and what we were going to use it for. And that would be a process that I'm not aware of how you would change that at this point in time. Unless Mr. Beal has any ideas of how that could even be looked at.
Thank you, Dwayne, Your Worship. When the gas tax plan money was put in for the next phase, which was, I believe, 2019 to 2023, what you have to do is submit a capital investment plan respecting the gas tax funds. So that has to be presented to council Then that has to be submitted to the province for approval. That would take a few months to do, for sure. Also, given that we're heading into election, it may slow things down. But in order to reallocate money to different projects. So when we submitted the project, when we submitted the capital investment plan respecting the gas tax fund, we had allocated our gas tax fund for 2021 to paving projects. So we can use it for paving projects, road reconstruction, but that's it without submitting a revised capital investment plan. There is rumors out and a few news articles saying that there is going to be additional funding coming through the federal government's budget, meaning a doubling of it again, like what was done a couple years ago. So if that happens, we will need to submit a new capital investment plan, a revised capital investment plan to be able to spend that, and those funds could more easily be looked at for other things.
Thanks, Michael. I'm sure it feels like I've asked the same question 5 times, but I don't mean to re-ask it. I was wondering if transportation and road resurfacing could also include, things like sidewalks or things that are slightly not quite exactly road resurfacing, but also seem to be in the same wheelhouse. So I'm not trying to ask the same question over and over again, I promise.
Okay, thank you. All right. With that, I will entertain a motion to move in camera for a couple of items.
I'll entertain it.
Okay, Councillor Finney, have a seconder, please.
I'll second that. Councillor Michaud.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Michaud. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Opposed?
Aye.
Okay, motion's carried. Okay, I'll ask everyone who's not involved in the in-camera discussion to please leave the meeting.
I will need a couple minutes to shut things down, Your Worship.
Okay, thank you.